released. And again, we've heard from the governor and the FBI that federal law enforcement on scene here helping with the massive response that we see here live from our helicopter and our ground crew, Molly Oak, all live on the scene. This is that on-ground perspective. You just see the massive number of cars, all the students, all the faculty and staff that are there at the school, fire trucks and ambulances in the distance. These are the scenes that make your heart sink when you see, and it's playing out in real time here in our community.
So now we're sort of switching to our ground shot from our crews that we have there. This is that line of parents that are outside the school. We're trying to wait to see if we can get our helicopter shot back. They've been out there for more than an hour, so they're going to regroup and we're going to try to come back to that. And so we're just kind of walking you through this scenario as we still see multiple emergency medical vehicles there on the scene. And that is because even as this is all unfolding, within the last 10 minutes, we saw someone being taken away on a chopper, presumably not connected to the shooting because that was all secure. This was in the football field area, which was in the safety zone per se, right? And that person was taken away. You have to think there is stress out there, there is anxiety out there, there is so much fear that is pumping through these students as they wait to be reunited with their families. This is some video that we're running back that we got from the chopper, just showing where the students were taken to safety there in the football field area.
That's a really important shot and good perspective because one, you see just how many students we're talking about. A school of 1,900 filling the bleachers there, filling the football stadium area. That shot right there is sort of what's become sort of the command center. We saw that mobile command unit that was there, and also that's where the medical helicopter we've been talking about. This was about 11:20 this morning where this life flight helicopter was taking off. We saw one person on a stretcher being carried into that helicopter, and we watched together live as it made its way to a hospital. Again, we can confirm one of the 4 injured. NBC reporting that there are 4 injured. One of the 4, Grady Hospital, has confirmed they have a gunshot wound there and are treating that person. We don't know the ages. I think that's also very important here. We don't know the ages of the people involved. Again, NBC reporting 4 injured, 2 people have died, but we don't know the ages of any of the people involved. We know there are about 1,900 students, and we know it was a full day with entire staff in the school as well. So we are waiting to hear about that as well as you get that overview of what's been happening now for more than 2 hours at Apalachee High School in Winder, Georgia.
Our 11 Alive's Molly Oak has been working on the ground here trying to give us more information. Liza Lucas handing me information from the side, and so even the White House press office has sent out this release saying President Biden has been briefed by his Homeland Security advisor Liz Sherwood Randall on the tragic shooting at Apalachee High School in Winder, Georgia, and his administration will continue coordinating with federal, state, and local officials as we receive more information. Producers, can you tell us if Molly has those interviews? Are those ready? Molly Oak is on the ground talking to people out there as mostly parents are responding, trying to reconnect and reunite with their children. President Joe Biden just releasing information saying that he has been briefed on the situation along with Governor Brian Kemp, also saying that he has indeed sent out even federal authorities here to join in on this investigation here.
And the entire community sending our strength and support as this is all playing out as we watch it together in real time. Molly Oak is live on the ground talking to people impacted there. Molly, I understand you've talked to some loved ones of the students there as they're waiting to reunite and learn more about what's happened inside the school during the shooting.
Yeah, Cheryl and Aisha, I'm going to stay off camera just so you can get this view of all of the law enforcement that's still here. You know, earlier when I spoke with you all, I told you the only thing that may rival the amount of law enforcement on scene is the amount of loved ones. That's who we've been talking to. I talked with one man who said he couldn't even believe it was real when he got the text from his son. And I just spoke with a grandmother. Here is what she told me.
I feel really sorry for the kids that they've had to experience this, and the parents who got those phone calls that it was their child. He was with the principal, and the principal told him, run to the band room, don't look back, just keep running. So that's all I know.
I'm so happy he's okay. And
Me too.
you said your daughter is with him now?
Yes, his mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sigh of relief.
Yes, ma'am.
You guys could see it because she had sunglasses on, but from standing just about a foot away from her, I could watch her as she was choking back tears the entire time she was speaking with me. I mean, she talked about also getting the call from her grandson's mother when she was at work saying, there's a shooting at the high school, you need to go now. And she said she immediately just got up, told the front desk, I'm out of here, and then drove here as fast as she physically could. Now, happy to say that her grandson is okay. He's a senior here at the high school. He is with his mom now, she says, but you heard her just harrowing account of what he experienced inside the school, and I'm going to join her in just of our thoughts and prayers for all the kids, students, staff, faculty, and staff that are inside that school, all the loved ones that are out here. It's hard to even talk to people right now, guys. I was shaking listening to her story. I've been shaking listening to other people's stories of when they got those texts or phone calls. So our hearts go out to all of them as this investigation continues. Back to you all.
So, Molly, tell us about these cars that are lining the street. Are they able to maneuver, or does it appear that everyone has sort of just gotten out of the cars because they're kind of stuck there as they try to make their way to their kids?
This place is on the strictest form of lockdown that I have seen in a long time, guys. I mean, when you park your car, you are parking your car and getting out. And that's what a lot of these parents that I talked with as they're making their way through, they're just trying to get as close as physically possible to the school. So whether that means they are parking and just going. There was one guy who found a scooter. He grabbed that and started going. We've seen people getting on golf carts, just trying to get as close as physically possible to those kids that one parent told me earlier have been moved to the football field. The only cars that we are seeing coming in and out is law enforcement or ambulances, and then of course the helicopters in the sky moving above. But that's all, the only movement that we really see here is whether people are on foot walking to and from the school, or you see sheriffs, you see law enforcement, you see ambulances. There's a golf cart that I was just mentioning. So people are definitely getting creative and trying to get as close as physically possible just to get their hands on their kids and feel that they are okay. Because I know it's a different thing for a parent to hear that a kid is okay than to physically be able to see and feel your kid and know that they are okay after something like this. So that's what these parents are trying to do. They are just trying to lay some eyes and hands on their kids to know that everyone is okay. As we see another ambulance cruise on by out here. Again, remember the GBI confirming to us that this is not just a local investigation at this point. This is local, state, and federal, and that's why you're seeing this mass amount of response here at the high school today, guys.
Yeah, Molly, I have to say, when you see an ambulance go by with lights on, it gives you pause.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, from NBC, we're reporting 4 injured and 2 have died. But Aisha brought up a good point. Just the trauma of the experience is something that may be affecting kids. So certainly, I know you're talking to people on the ground. Let us know if you hear any more information about that ongoing response to help students and staff there on the ground, and this visual of parents just walking down the street. They're just leaving their cars, walking down the street. Molly, you're exactly right. It's one thing to hear that your loved one's okay. It's another to see them. And as people know, there are injured and 2 who have passed away. There are people who are scared and are not going to feel okay until they see someone standing in front of them.
And so again, we know Grady Memorial Level 1 Trauma Center in Atlanta, about an hour away from the school, they've reported receiving one of those victims. Let's get to 11 Alive's Erica Murphy there live from Grady Hospital, telling us what she is seeing there. Erica, what can you tell us?
Well, we know that we have had some shots fired at Apalachee High School in Winder this morning, and we know that several people were shot. And what we also know today is that Grady Memorial officials are confirming that at least one of the victims from that high school shooting has been brought here to Grady Memorial by medevac. Now, the suspect is in custody. We are learning that according to the sheriff's office in Barrow County. The details about exactly what happened here are still rolling in, but we do know that both the FBI are on the scene, GBI is on the scene, and Governor Kemp is sending all resources to help out with this situation. Now, we are continuing to check in with authorities so we can learn more about exactly how many victims there are, how many fatalities, how many injured. Of course, once we get those details, we will share them with you. Reporting from Grady Memorial Hospital, Erica Murphy, 11 Alive News.
Erica, thank you so much. We want to share a new information that we've just gotten from the mayor of Atlanta, Andre Dickens, who writes, I'm reading here with you as I'm going to read this together. Let me just find it here on the screen. My prayers are with the high school students, staff, and families affected by the senseless act of violence in Winder, Georgia. I have been in contact with the chief and the Atlanta Police Department. They've been working with the Atlanta Public Schools Police Department to bolster patrols around our schools for the rest of the day out of abundance of caution. APD has also been on standby in case law enforcement agencies need assistance with this incident. May God comfort the victims and their loved ones in the difficult days ahead. Again, that's coming just moments ago from Mayor Andre Dickens and the city of Atlanta.
And although we know that one suspect is in custody, it's interesting to hear that the mayor's initial response was to talk to APD and sort of bolster patrols around the schools here, because what sort of happens is the information spreads, right? And you don't want that fear and anxiety going throughout the district, throughout Metro Atlanta to these students as they know something has happened somewhere else. So just giving that sense of peace and calm to the students as they go about the rest of their school day. It's sort of hard to know that something like this has happened to your peers, whether you know them or not. You know what I mean? It just sort of gives that feeling of, if we see a heavier police presence around, we know that, you know, people are aware and people are efforting to keep us safe. Think about it. You're a child. Even though we're talking about a high school, kids have encountered one of the biggest tragedies they will probably ever encounter in their lifetime. We don't know what they heard, what they saw during this incident. The grandmother that Molly spoke to said her grandson, a senior there at Apalachee High School, was with the principal who said, run, don't turn back, run to the band room. Can you imagine just what's going to be going through his mind, if, you know, for months and years to come, just of this moment here? Think about all of the students there that we see years later from school shootings that happened so many years ago. They may have been in elementary school. It is burned in their minds what happened that day.
I'm still in touch with a number of parents and students who are at Columbine High School, and this was a defining moment in their lives. And I think it's important for the community to come together in a lot of ways in a moment like this, and to show our support for people impacted, and our understanding that this will be a moment that has great repercussions for everybody inside the school and beyond, because of just the anxiety and how it gives you pause for what students and staff face every day as they go into school, just to learn, and parents, I know that these are thoughts that you think about, and you know that the protocols are in place, and you know what can happen, but you still don't expect that phone call or text to come through, and it came through today for every parent of a student at Apalachee High School. 1,900 students at this school.
And I can't help but think, Cheryl, we are just a few weeks into the new school year, you know, and so this is going to be something that they have to live with and navigate throughout the rest of this school year. And we just see this huge response of these family members and loved ones. To just imagine, there are still some parents that haven't been able to reach their child or to see them physically, to know that they are okay. And when you roll up and just, like Molly said, the only thing that's equal to the amount of law enforcement and emergency personnel is the amount of cars of parents lined up trying to get to their child. And so there are some heavy pounding hearts right now. Even we are up here bringing this story. I'm keeping you guys updated on social media. We're keeping you updated on air. We are all experiencing this together, getting this information from Winder, Georgia as it comes in. It is 12:50 right now. That call came in from Apalachee High School at 10:23 this morning. So we are well over 2 hours into this incident. And just in the last 30 minutes, we saw another stretcher being taken away from someone dealing with a medical emergency after this school was secure, because that one suspect is in custody. So even with that knowledge, there is still fear pumping through these students and these faculty members who just witnessed this.
And the waiting now for 2 hours to leave the school grounds, to get information, to be reunited, for whether you're a student student or maybe a loved one or spouse, or you have a parent who teaches at the school, thinking about the entire staff today. And again, we want to reiterate, while NBC is reporting 4 injured and 2 dead, we don't know the ages of anybody involved. We know 1 gunshot patient was taken to Grady, a level 1 trauma center. No information yet on where the other 3 injured, according to NBC, are. Waiting to hear more from the Sheriff's Department. It stood out to Aisha and I both initially when the Sheriff's Department sent out its first official piece of information that the word was casualties, plural. Yeah. And I think both of us took a deep breath when we saw that, knowing that this was going to have a wide impact in a lot of ways. Parents still walking down the road to the high school. You see this vantage point is quite a distance from the school. There's no driving in there for some parents. They're just going to get out of the car and walk to go find their loved ones. Again, a coordinated effort from the FBI, state, and local police at this point, as the governor was quick to share that information more than an hour ago, talking about state resources responding to the incident. And the governor said all Georgians, asking all of us to pray for the safety of those in our classrooms in Barrow County and across the state. We understand that this is something every student, every parent, every teacher watches and will change the way they get up and head to school tomorrow.
And there are also just so many questions still out there, right? So we know that we have the 2 dead and the 4 injured, with one of those injured people being at Grady, but we don't know the extent of those injuries.
Right.
And so that's sort of a major question mark here in this story as well, just how severe those injuries are for the people who have been injured here during this shooting. We are well over 2 hours into this tragedy here at Apalachee High School, and we're still just getting this new fresh information as it comes in. But the main priority right now, beyond the medical perspective, is reuniting all of those students, a school of 1,900, with their loved ones. And Molly Oak is on the ground along with Doug Richards as well. We're sure Doug is out there gathering information and talking to families on the ground. Just really how tough it is to get inside of there with this school being still on this lockdown here at this property. And this video that we're seeing right now, that was a little bit earlier when we saw multiple emergency vehicles speeding away from the high school. We have no idea where they were going or if there's now going to be possibly a second scene here that we're going to hear about. So as we're learning the information, you guys are learning the information too.
And a key piece of information worth reiterating is 1 suspect is in custody, and that would be a primary source of potential information for investigators who are now trying to piece together what happened and why, and if perhaps just that one person, that one suspect in custody was involved, or if there are others they need to be talking to. So that's a key piece of information in a couple of ways. One, that suspect is in custody and they're not looking for that person, and also that person being a source of information to piece together what happened inside Apalachee High School this morning at 10:23.
Just got a good question from someone who's joining me on my Instagram Live, saying, are they looking for anyone else there besides the one person that they have in custody? They have not told us that. Cheryl, check your phone. We just got a text message from Liza Lucas. We are hearing from the superintendent, Richard Woods, on this shooting here. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get that one up.
Yep, I've got it right here, Aisha. It says, I am devastated.
The state superintendent.
This is, yes, State Superintendent Richard Woods on the shooting at Apalachee High School. I'm going to just read this live with you together here on the air. I'm devastated by the news of the tragic shooting at Apalachee High School today. My heart and prayers are with the families and loved ones of those affected and the entire Barrow County community. This is an unimaginable loss for Barrow and for our entire educational community across the state. The Georgia Department of Education is actively monitoring the situation in Barrow County and will continue to respond as additional information is available. Our school safety team is in contact with the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency and with Barrow County Schools, and our entire agency stands ready to assist in any way possible. I ask that all Georgians keep the community of Apalachee High School and first and foremost the families of those lost in your thoughts. I know we will come together as a state to support the Barrow County community as they face this tragic loss. Again, that is from the State Superintendent Richard Woods just a moment ago about the shooting at Apalachee High School.
And we are still awaiting for new information to come in. Again, just received a very good question. Are they looking for anyone else besides the one suspect that is in custody? We have not heard any confirmation that they are. We've only been told that the one suspect is in custody. 2 people are dead, and additionally that 4 people have been injured here. So this is a very fluid situation, even more than 2 hours in, as we continue to get information on this story as it is developing. Those families showing up there to the school, trying to make contact with their students there. 1,900 students attend this school. Now, we do want to say that this has gone all the way to the White House. We just got word that President Biden has been briefed on this situation. Governor Kemp has responded, saying he is dispatching however many resources are necessary, including the FBI. FBI Atlanta confirming their involvement here in this investigation already, along with Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens releasing a statement saying out of an abundance of caution, they have amped up security and police presence around APD surrounding Atlanta public schools, giving them the sense of peace that they may be looking for, knowing that this has happened to, their peers there in Winder. So we're looking at video that we got earlier from our chopper, just showing all these students gathering there on the grounds. Just, you can't even imagine how hard it is, to get all of these students back to their loved ones, just as far as they, trying to get there. The streets are blocked off. So you got to imagine how many cars are just responding here, trying to get their kids and just lay eyes on them for the first time after getting that text or phone call,
Aisha, another question that came in about were there school resource officers inside the school, and we don't know that for certain, but we can tell you that the Barrow County School District website shows at least 2 SROs are assigned to Apalachee High School. So we do know that they have SROs that are assigned to the school. I'm sure in the days and weeks ahead we'll learn more about what support was inside the school when all of this happened at 10:23 this morning.
Yeah, we're just about 2.5 hours removed from that first call coming in there right at 10:23, Cheryl. And so when you put it into perspective, I think the number one goal right now, these are all great questions that we are getting in from viewers. It's that these things are going to take so much time, and that school has to be 100% secure. The investigation will be extremely extensive as they start to uncover and peel off the layers to this scenario. We came on air with only the fact that the school was possibly even locked down. So from 11:15 to now, almost 1 p.m., we've evolved from this possible lockdown at Apalachee to we see 1 medical helicopter leaving the scene, and now we understand from NBC News 2 are dead, 4 injured. So just look how the information continues to build here as all of this comes in. So as we get it, we are bringing it to you within seconds. We have reporters literally on the side handing us these press releases and information as it comes in. So while we do know the school resource officer aspect, that's a pretty standard practice around Metro Atlanta, right? But we just can't confirm if they had one or not at the time.
And we understand that as these events happen in our community, there is such a need and want for information, but just also understand that first and foremost there is an investigation, and police have to tread very carefully to protect the investigation that moves forward. So trying to balance the sharing of information, which is really critical to the people involved and the people impacted, and for the greater community who is feeling this and experiencing this right along with them, but also having to protect a certain level of information as well. well as they think about an investigation moving forward. Again, they have shared one person is in custody, and we're not certain if there are more that they are considering, but we know that one person will be a key for information moving forward.
According to Northeast Georgia Medical Center, their public information officer, one patient has been transported to their facility in Barrow, and one patient is en route to their facility in Gainesville. That Gainesville location is the level 1 trauma center. So we can now sort of put a place on the 4 injured. We have one at Grady. We have one patient at Barrow at their facility, and then one patient is en route to the facility in Gainesville, which is a level 1 trauma center. Now again, it's 4 injured, so we can surely account for the location of the 3. But still not knowing the extent of the injuries here. That information coming in from the Northeast Georgia Medical Center public information officer. That's new information there.
But it's significant that they chose to send 2 of these patients to level 1 trauma centers, which are a great distance away. So that is a key piece of information, knowing that whatever they're dealing with, they felt the need to send them to the 2 level 1 trauma centers closest. But one is that Northeast Medical Center is still 30 miles from the high school. Grady is 40 miles from the high school. But again, if you're just joining us, we did see the medical helicopters on scene. They are the ones that would transport to those level 1 facilities so they can get the patients to the help as fast as possible.
And we do want to just let you guys know that this situation has gone all the way up to the White House, all the way up to the FBI. And so while we don't have any word on a suspect, it is important to know that we have one suspect in custody, but no details on who this person is, age, or anything of any of the people that have been injured here in this scenario. And so there are still so many questions out there, but we can say that the threat here appears to be over based on the body language. We see another mother there getting their child from the school. People have had to park those cars and just get out and walk. They're calling their kids, where can you meet me? Where can we go? We see a student there with his shirt over his face, not knowing what that young man has experienced, but glad to see him with a loved one there. I mean, this is just absolutely gut-wrenching and just so hard to know. I'm a mom. I'm gonna call them babies. What these babies have experienced and what they witnessed, just seeing your loved one for the first time. The grandmother that Molly spoke to, she was the grandma showing up. The son was already with the mom, but the whole village is showing up to show support to these kids and thinking about the ones who don't have anyone to come and get them either.
You read my mind. Yeah. That's it. When I saw that young man, you know, walking across the field with presumably his mom, it's the first thing I thought of. You know, we are bringing you this information as journalists, but we are bringing you this information as parents and members of this community. And I know everyone watching is feeling it today, and it does make an impact. And so we just want to acknowledge that this is difficult for the state and even people beyond the state watching, and really thinking about those of you who know someone there, and just feeling that for you together, and thinking about these kids, these high school freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors who should be thinking about, you know, getting ready for a high school football game this weekend or taking a test, and you know, instead they're finding out more about what happened inside their school and the loss of people that they know and care about, and people in the hospital right now who are getting help, and we hope will have full recoveries. And then just the greater impact of experiencing this, whether you're physically harmed or not, there is a toll that it takes on everybody involved. We continue to hear more and more from our lawmakers and our legislators and our state and federal leaders. It is worth reiterating that FBI is there on the scene. They are helping coordinate Because as you see this picture right here, you're seeing law enforcement vehicles from, you know, a 50-mile radius. It's like all hands on deck. Everybody comes in this moment, and it is a coordinated effort to get all of that in motion in a way that is effective and protects the investigation and cares for the community moving forward. And unfortunately, a lot of those law enforcement protocols and procedures are in place because of school shootings that have happened in the years past, where maybe that wasn't the case and there was confusion in these times. And so those procedures put into place, unfortunately, you hope they never have to be used, but when they are, hopefully they are effective to make a terrible situation just a little less chaotic for everybody involved.
There was just such a eagerness and a hustle of these people as they respond here to this school. They've parked the car, they've gotten out, and they are trying to get to their children. But just think about it. There are two families here in this case that are not going to get the call from the loved one that they're waiting for. 2 people are dead here. 4 others are injured. We have accounted for the locations of at least 3 of the people who have been injured so far. 1 has been taken to Grady, 1 has been taken to Northeast Medical Center in Gainesville, the level 1 trauma center. Another one has been taken to the location in Barrow. And that sort of speaks to the level of injuries, especially for the 2 who have gone there actually to get to the level 1 trauma centers in Grady there and in Gainesville, both about an hour away from the school. We can say that we saw 2 medical helicopters that arrived there on the scene in response here to this situation. Producers, I want to see if you guys have our former law enforcement officer ready on Zoom. Is that ready? Can we confirm that? That's one area that we cannot speak to. We want to sort of get in the mind of law enforcement to say what sort of the response here, what are they doing? We have Thaddeus Johnson right now, who is a criminology professor at Georgia State University and a former law enforcement officer out of Memphis, Tennessee. Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for being with us. What can you sort of add to what we are seeing here as it relates to how law enforcement is trained to respond to these sort of incidents? All right, looks like we're still waiting to get Mr. Johnson fully connected. It looks like he's dialing in there. Producers are going to do a mic check with him to make sure that he can indeed hear us. Mr. Johnson, can you hear me?
Absolutely, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much. I was saying, just as you're watching this picture live with us and seeing the law enforcement response from your time as a law enforcement officer in Memphis and now being a criminology professor at GSU, what can you tell us about what we're seeing here with this response?
Yes, so with the response, the one thing when you have these types of situations, it can be chaotic. To the untrained eye, it can look like a whole lot of confusion is going on. But when you have these situations, when the officers first arrive on the scene, they're not there to look out for victims or to render first aid. The top priority is to go in, stop the threat, and prevent the further loss of life or injury as soon as possible. And you usually won't see like SWAT or specialized units unless they made it to the scene first, until after other officers generally already entered. You don't wait for a SWAT response. Once the threat is actually neutralized, that's when you start seeing police render aid. They may secure the scene and bring in EMS as well. One thing that's particularly funny about these situations, particularly when you're inside a school building, that can up the ante a little bit. And so generally you'll see students coming out with their hands up, and that's to show that they're not a threat, and that allows officers to also do a visual scan or frisk to see if they have any weapons, any injuries, or things of that nature. Because mind you, officers are not sure who's the culprit, who are victims once they get on scene, unless someone is engaged in shooting or has been pointed out. And so once the initial threat is neutralized, stuff is still going on. They're still investigating. You'll start seeing officers and police departments. Usually you'll see multiple agencies beyond fire and MMS. And so you'll see staging areas where they have those who were witnesses, those who were victims, They have them a certain area. They have the media in a certain area, and they also present a secure perimeter around the crime scene, for lack of better terms, to keep citizens out and also not to contaminate the scene for the follow-up investigation. So those are some of the things that you tend to see in these scenarios.
It's just been such a tough time for law enforcement in our community. We've had 2 law enforcement officers to tragically die in the line of duty here in our area just over the last 2 weeks. We had one who was shot and is recovering. And so talk about the impact here for the law enforcement officers who are responding. I'm sure many of them mothers and fathers as well. I think it's totally different when you know you're responding and children are in harm's way.
Yeah, I think one thing that we should all be mindful of, that compared to the type of shootings that we have in general society, this is a very small subset, but you're so important that it hits the heart, right? It hits a little bit different. Again, it ups the ante. And so even as officers, officers see life and death situations all day. They see people at their worst. They see injuries. They deal with a lot. They carry a whole lot. And the job itself is inherently dangerous because of all the unknowns. We also know that most of our police officers don't receive the mental health care, the physical care, and emotional care that's needed for this type of job.
Yeah.
Usually when you have these scenarios, officers tend to debrief about the situation, but not necessarily about what they're experiencing. And so it's so important that officers control those emotions when they're approaching these scenes, because your emotions can't get the best of you. You have to be tactically sound. You have to prevent yourself from having auditory exclusion, visual, tunnel vision, because lives are at stake, and not only of the kids and the students and the staff and faculty, but also your fellow officers. You want to make sure that everyone gets out safely. So law enforcement can be a heavy job, and these types of situations are things that officers will carry them probably for the rest of their lives.
Mr. Thaddeus Johnson, thank you so much for joining us and just sort of allowing us to tap into the mind of law enforcement here in this scenario. We will check back in with you soon. Now let's get to a press conference happening now from authorities.
We're standing on the campus of Apalachee High School here at Barrow County Schools. First and foremost, I want to lift up our community. I want to give our sympathies to our community, our school system, our kids, our parents that had to witness this today. Obviously, what you see behind us is an evil thing today. At about 9:30 this morning, we received the first call that there was an active shooter on this campus. We're not releasing any information as far as injuries, but we have multiple injuries. This is a very, very fluid investigation. It's very early. And I have asked the assistance of the GBI and the agencies here behind me today, and there are multiple agencies that responded this morning to help us and help the sheriff's office. We do have a suspect in custody, and we are asking for your patience as the media to please let us get the facts that we need to make sure we get this right. Again, I've asked the GBI to help us, the sheriff's office, to help us along with this. I know this is not what you want to hear, but I'm not going to answer questions after this is over with. But I wanted to give you the respect and our community the respect to let them know what was going on initially. We're in the process of reunifying our students with their parents. Obviously that's chaotic, but we want to be respectful of them and their privacy as well. I want to thank the state, the federal agencies, the local agencies that showed up today. As you can see, the multiple EMS and fire from other agencies that responded today. Again, I ask that you lift up Barrow County Schools, lift up Apalachee, lift up our agencies. This is going to take multiple days for us to get answers as to what happened and why this happened. But I wanted to give you a statement. It is our hope, in conjunction with these people behind us, that we can give you another statement around 4 o'clock, because I know you have to go back on the air. That is my hope. But I wanted to be fluid with you all, understanding that it's fluid as well with this investigation. I appreciate you being patient with us. Again, it's very active and is ever developing. Every minute it's developing on what we're finding. So we're going to have releases from other schools. Again, we ask that you be patient with us. Please be patient with us. And hopefully I can give you more information or more better information if you will, this afternoon. Thank you all for coming out here. We'll be back shortly, okay?
Sheriff, it's been widely reported that people are dead. Is that true?
I'm not releasing any information. We have multiple injuries.
Can you say if the person in custody is an adult or a juvenile?
I'm not releasing any information. Guys, I'm not going to answer any more questions this time, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it, a press conference there from the Barrow County Sheriff giving us very limited information, just really stretching that this is a fluid situation and that this is very active and ongoing. He only reported that there were an active shooter call that came in around 9:30 this morning. Now, the banner that you see on your screen with the 2 dead and 4 injured, that is coming from NBC News. They will not even answer questions about the number of people, but he did confirm that there is 1 suspect in custody. At the end, you heard 11 Alive's Doug Richards go ahead and try to get that question to see if the person
hopefully answer more questions for you, okay? Or be in a position to give you more answers. We'll just have to see how things
We
go.
just realized this was happening. Tell us how many people, what you know about that.
We're not in any kind of position. The sheriff's made his comments. We'll leave it at that. By 4 o'clock, we hope to have a better picture, so you can better comprehend what's going on. Okay, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The goal now just to get all of those children reunited there with their families, and they do hope to give us another update around 4 p.m. as more information comes in and they feel more comfortable putting that information out there.
Yeah, and you can understand why they really want to make sure that they get the right information out and really make sure, as he said, that the priority remains getting these parents reunited with their children, getting some of these schools that are on lockdown, including an elementary and middle school in the area, getting them really back where they need to be in terms of safety and those parents as well. We also want to mention that he did stress that this is still a fluid and active situation. You can still see in that area a large number of police officers, as he mentioned, from both the GBI, FBI, and a number of local agencies there, still looking for answers as to what happened. We do not know those details as to exactly what happened, why it happened, but we do know when it happened. It happened around 9:30 this morning. We heard that's when the first calls came into police about an active shooter. Again, a lot of questions in terms of perhaps a motive behind this, or who was injured, or who this suspect is. Again, we don't know if this was a student at the school. We don't know if it was an adult. All we know that suspect is now in custody.
And so right before we went to that press conference, we got an update there from the Winder Police Department. This is pretty important here. If you think about going to this area, you have a loved one in the community. They say that they're working this scene here with the presence there, of course, very heavy. We talk about the high school and the middle school along with Winder Elementary. So all the schools within the county are currently on lockdown with the officers on hand to keep those scenes contained. They're going to communicate as soon as parents in the other schools can be paired with their children. We know the students from Apalachee High School, they have been given the clear to reunite with their families, but you got to consider the entire district is on lockdown. We're not even close to school release, and so they're trying to figure out the best situation to get the other schools off lockdown and reuniting with parents because of the traffic situation. All of these cars there. This says, please stay clear, keep all the roadways open by not blocking entrances and roadways and school lanes with your cars. Everything is contained at this time. They're working with the staff to communicate all the next steps for the release as soon as possible. Again, they want you to stay out of those emergency lanes and keep the entrances and exits clear so that law enforcement can come and go as this investigation keeps going. So all the other schools are safe right now, Jonathan.
And of course, being a parent as well, that's so hard when you hear something has happened at your child's school or even in the district. Immediately you want to go, you want to be there. But again, their concern is that if everyone shows up to the middle school, the elementary school, and of course the high school all at once, that is going to impede what they're trying to do, which is to make sure they can continue their investigation. So again, if you are a parent, the key word there is that everything has been contained. They believe that everything is safe. This suspect is now in custody, and there is no immediate threat to that area. But understandably, parents still want to be there and reunite. And as he said in that news conference, that is one of their goals and their priorities right now.
I'm on social media right now on Instagram Live. We're seeing people comment from Riverdale. We're seeing someone saying Phoenix, Arizona is carrying 11 alive right now as we are given this information. So there is outpouring of support and love coming from everywhere. But just in case, let's go ahead and set up sort of the boundaries and where we are. A lot of people think Georgia, you automatically think Atlanta. No, this is happening about 45 minutes northeast of the city. And so producers have sort of put together a map for you so that we can give you perspective on where all of this is happening. Even in regards to the trauma centers where 2 of those patients were taken, you see Apalachee High School there in Barrow, and then you see Atlanta. And so we're talking about at least a 45-minute to an hour drive away from the city where we are following this situation here as it relates to Northeast Georgia Medical Center and Grady. Unfortunately, both of those locations were about an hour in the opposite direction to get those injured people to those level 1 trauma centers. One person brought to Atlanta to Grady, another person stayed there in the county and went to that one in Gainesville, and then one other person was able to go to the smaller hospital in Barrow. We have not gotten word on where the 4th injured person has gone. Again, these numbers coming from NBC News, 2 dead and 4 injured there in the shooting.
And Aisha, we have a number of reporters, of course, there near the high school and at the hospital. We want to get right out now live to 11 Alive's Molly Oak. Molly, what can you tell us? What's the update?
Well, you know, Jonathan, when I was talking with Aisha and Cheryl earlier, we talked about how this isn't only affecting the people right here inside of the school, but really the entire community. And I want to speak to that as I step aside so you get a closer look. We are now right across the street from the school. You're seeing that law enforcement presence. But we talk about the community response. I talked with a woman. Now, her child does not go to this school, but her neighbor's child does. That neighbor calls her, says, I'm an hour away. There's been a shooting at my son's school. How quickly can you get there? That neighbor gets here as quickly as they can. They have to park their car, ditch the car, walk 2.5 miles just to lay some eyes on her senior. Now, that senior is okay, but he did tell her some information. He said that he was in the 10th grade hallway. That's where his classroom was when the shooting happened. He said he was in the classroom right across from the other classroom, and that classroom was where the shooting was happening. Now, when that woman came to try to pick him up, she said she was only able to talk with him for a little bit and see him to physically know that he is okay, but she says he actually has to stick here on the football field. We told you earlier that they moved those students onto the football field. Now, she's telling me any students who saw or heard anything are now getting interviewed by the GBI, which could take hours. So she said she was heading out when we spoke with her. Again, just lots of hugs and compassion coming from the community, knowing that the kid was okay. But she said the mom's about 5 minutes away to come and just wait on him to be done. But again, GBI, we're being told, is interviewing students on the football field who may have heard or seen anything. Also talking to a parent and a grandmother just now who are actually trying to pick up their 8-year-old who goes to the school down the street. She says they are also on lockdown, so she's not even sure if she'll be able to get to her baby. But she says, again, that sentiment of not just hearing that your child is okay, but physically being able to see them, to touch them and hold them. That is really what the feeling of emotion is out here right now, Aisha and Jonathan. But again, we cannot express just the mass amount of law enforcement. And again, it's not just here in the county. GBI telling us earlier, it is local, state, federal. We are seeing police and sheriffs from all over. I mean, just across from me, I see Henry County Sheriff, I see City of Monroe Police, I see Walton County Fire Rescue. So this is a state investigation, GSP passing through as well as GBI continues this investigation. We did get that small update a little bit ago from that press conference, hoping to hear more from the sheriff's office here as well. But for now, we're going to toss it back to you. But again, just a lot of law enforcement and a lot of parents here on scene just wanting to give their kids a hug and know that they're okay.
Yeah, you can understand that. Molly Oak live for us. Thank you so much. One of the things that stood out that Molly said is that some of these students, we got to remember, they witnessed this. They were in the classroom. That student that Molly spoke to, or at least the guardian said that they heard the gunfire from the 10th grade hallway. Yeah. They could see people panicking. So for some of these students, they saw this, they heard this firsthand.
Just such a tragedy here. In a video a few minutes ago, Jonathan, we saw one of the students walking away, just sort of holding his face, t-shirt over his face as he was walking away with the loved one that he was finally reunited with. He just looked just beside himself, just kind of considering what they witnessed, what they heard, and just, you know, for years to come, just thinking about this day. 11 Alive's Doug Richards standing by there on the ground. Doug, you were at that press conference there with the sheriff. I heard your question there at the end, trying to see if this suspect was a student or an adult. They're pretty tight-lipped, but understandably so here with just how evolving this situation is. But what can you tell us right now?
Truthfully, not a lot more than what you heard at the press conference, except to say that we're standing on the grounds of a high school that is obviously in a very unusual condition. There are hundreds of people on foot between here and the mile and a half or so we walked to get here, going back and forth. Folks who were coming on foot to investigate the status of their students in the school. One lady who said that she came here actually saw the student but was unable to leave the student, leave with the student because the GBI was poised to investigate that student, and so as a result was unable to leave, but at least had gotten the assurance that the child was okay. And there's a lot of that, it appears, going on here, where adults are showing up, getting an assurance that their child was not among those harmed or among those folks who may be still in any kind of danger, and the indication is that the danger is past. Nonetheless, obviously there are scores, if not hundreds, of law enforcement folks here who are making sure that that's the case, assisting in the ongoing investigation, and trying to wrap this thing up. They sounded pretty confident that there was going to be able to be a release of further information at 4 o'clock, which is 2.5 hours from now. So they seem confident that a lot of the investigative details that they need to have, that they can release, will be wrapped up in that relatively short period of time. In law enforcement clocks, not, you know, some of us may be impatient, but obviously, as you said, they want to get it right, and they want to make sure that they don't want to have to backtrack on any information that is released initially, just because it can turn into a bad look both in court as well as, you know, in the public sphere. So that's where we are now at the high school, where we are still seeing parents and still seeing lots of law enforcement, and have had an assurance that the investigation is in a place where it's advancing as it should do. Back to you.
All right, Doug Richards there. Thank you so much. Looking forward to that press conference there at 4 o'clock if they're able to give us information. Let's sort of reset. I got 11 Alive's Jonathan Martin in with me now. Jennifer Bellamy standing by to tap out to go into our afternoon shift. You're looking at video from earlier from the 11 Alive Sky Tracker that was over the scene very early on here as law enforcement officers got 1,900 kids enrolled at Apalachee High School to safety out of the building there to the football field. That was the safety location as they worked to secure the perimeter and to secure the building, as you saw those crews responding there. What we know is this call came in around 9:30. That was the latest time that we got from the sheriff. Initially, we were told 10:23 that first call came in. Regardless, it was early in the day as students were even before the lunch hour. Calls of shots fired from Apalachee High School. They got to the scene and discovered the shooting had indeed taken place. Results that we got about 2.5 hours later here, Jonathan, was that 2 people were dead and 4 were injured, and that came from NBC News. But as we saw in that press conference, the sheriff was very slow to put a number to anything, including ages of that person who was in custody, any of that. So they're walking a real thin line with what they are releasing here.
Absolutely, saying that he is not giving any details right now on injuries, just calling the situation still fluid and the investigation early. But again, he reiterated, for anyone wondering, one suspect now in custody, and they do say that they have the situation contained. So again, this is some video you're looking at from earlier when the scene there was very much more active there at Apalachee High School. Really, the priority now, as we heard from law enforcement, is to make sure that parents, as many as they can be reunited with their students. You can understand that this is such a emergent, shocking situation for a lot of parents. They just want to be there, perhaps to just see their kids in person, hug them, but obviously there's a concern with getting parents connected in terms of traffic. They have encouraged parents from the middle school and elementary school not to block the roadways. They're going to give more information soon on when those students from the other schools nearby that are on lockdown can be released. And again, as Aisha said, we are expecting another news conference around the 4 o'clock hour. Could be sooner, could come later, but that's when we expect the next update from police. But again, right now from NBC, they're reporting 2 people dead, 4 injured in the shooting. Again, we do not know the extent of the injuries. We do not know details on the suspect, if it was perhaps a student at the school, an adult, a juvenile. We just don't know. I'm joined now by 11 Alive evening anchor Jennifer Bellamy, who will be joining us as we continue our coverage. And Jennifer, this all unfolded today around 9:30. That's when those first calls came into police. Police responded around 10 or so and realized that this indeed was an active shooter and a really serious situation.
And really such a scary situation for these families as they started to get that messaging from those students there on campus, and also for family members of anyone who has a loved one who is a part of this Apalachee High School family, whether they're a teacher or working there on the staff in some other capacity. So this is the information, the call, the text messages that nobody ever wants to hear. But again, that is unfolding right now out of Barrow County. Right now, you are looking at images from our 11 Alive Sky Tracker that we have been getting for you throughout the morning as the situation has unfolded. And we're continuing to work all of our sources to get you more information. Again, we know from NBC News reporting right now, 2 dead, 4 injured in a shooting there at Apalachee High School in Barrow County.
And a large police presence, Jennifer, there, of course, as you might expect. We have seen agencies, including the GBI, members of the FBI, multiple local agencies, and some from Atlanta there in this county as a part of this investigation. And as we heard from law enforcement during the update just about 20 minutes ago, they are still very much in the early stages of figuring out what happened. One of the things they're doing right now is interviewing some of those students. As we heard from our Molly Oak, who was there, she spoke with the guardian of one of those students who said that he heard the gunfire in the 10th grade hallway. Some students perhaps witnessed this by hearing it or seeing it firsthand. So they're interviewing a lot of those students while other students have been reunited with their parents and are allowed to leave for the day.
And you talked about how early this is in this investigation. So early, in fact, that the sheriff did not want to give many details at this hour when he addressed the media about this situation. He did say that he hoped to come back at about 4 o'clock. So in just a couple hours from now, we hope that we will hear from the sheriff and get more information about what is going on. We understand from the Barrow County Sheriff's Office that 1 suspect is in custody. It's not clear right now if there's anybody else or how else this investigation is unfolding. Oftentimes in these situations, law enforcement will go visit the home of a suspect and they'll look in other aspects of that life with their family as well. And so we will be following this investigation for you over the next couple of days and weeks and months, even as law enforcement continue to piece together everything that happened here and try to answer the question of why.
And Jennifer, we just got just a heartbreaking update. Our producers in our ear saying that CNN now reporting, again, CNN reporting 4 dead, approximately 30 injured. Again, that is coming from CNN, which is, of course, a greater number than what we had heard originally from NBC reporting. Just heartbreaking when you see that, knowing how many people, how many families affected by what happened there today. We did know that the sheriff was very tight-lipped, very slow to really give any numbers. He knew that there was various reporting out there, and perhaps this is why, because they knew that this perhaps was much worse than anyone originally thought.
Yeah, and again, this is an unfolding situation. When you talk about people who are injured in a situation like this, you just don't know what injured means. It could mean something very minor, and it could be something extremely serious. And we are talking about at least one person we know being transported all the way out from Barrow County to Grady Memorial Hospital here in the city of Atlanta. When you hear about something like that, you know that it's very serious for them to be transported such a distance for medical treatment and attention. And so again, we are hoping that these numbers do not continue to shift anymore with this new information. CNN reporting 4 dead, about 30 injured so far.
And you just think about how many people, how many families impacted by this, so many students there, some 1,900 students who attend this high school. If you're unfamiliar with this area, this is about, I believe, about 45 miles, 45 minutes or so outside of the Atlanta area, but still affecting so many people in that community and beyond. We know Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens has been informed. He has really reinforced security at some of Atlanta public schools, just because, again, when things like this happen, it really affects our whole community and beyond. We know Governor Brian Kemp has also pledged any resources, pushed all resources necessary to that area, and this even making it all the way to the White House with the president being briefed on what's happened as well.
And you talk about this situation and the ripple effect. We know that there will be a major impact to this community, but it does have a ripple for all of the students across Georgia and across the nation. You mentioned the president being briefed on the situation. It does have that ripple effect, and I'm sure there are other school districts across Metro Atlanta that are also increasing their security as the school day is coming closer to an end for so many other students across Metro Atlanta. Right now, these are images that you're seeing we took from our 11 Live Sky Tracker and the ground from earlier in the day, and we know that those students were taken out to safety to that football field. That's what you were seeing just a short time ago on your screens, and we understand that that was a location that was deemed safe for those students. And again, we understand that they are working on reuniting parents and guardians with their students at this point. But again, that is going to be a lengthy and difficult process for them to undertake to make sure that these parents and students are reunited and that these students are able to make it home safely.
Yeah, and I think when a lot of people were watching this unfold, you saw just the number of ambulances there on the grounds of the school. You saw some of the helicopters taking at least a couple people away by life flight, and you had the feeling that this may be worse than, again, we first thought. Again, CNN right now reporting 4 dead, approximately 30 injured. We don't know the extent of those injuries, but again, unfortunately, this is turning out to be a lot more serious of a situation than we thought. Right now, again, some of those schools are on lockdown. You can see our Molly Oak in this picture. She is there among our reporters, along with Doug Richards and others, who are gathering information and talking to parents and students and law enforcement as much as we can at this point.
And unfortunately, we talk now about students having to practice for situations like this at school. It used to be a time when you practiced for hurricanes and you practiced for tornadoes, but practicing for a mass shooting or an intruder on campus is something that is a reality for our students, unfortunately, nowadays, and this is actually unfolding for them, and this is something that will unfortunately change their lives for as long as they live. And this is something that we are unfortunately having to deal with. So many times we do hear about different incidents and situations happening on our school campuses, and fortunately, for the most part, some of them do not amount to what we are seeing happen today. But again, this newest information, this reporting from CNN now saying 4 dead, approximately 30 injured. Those numbers have increased from NBC's reporting earlier this afternoon that 2 were dead and 4 injured.
That's right, and just heartbreaking when you think about the number of people impacted by what's happened today. You're taking a live look near the area where you can see just a number of people now leaving the school, heartbroken, leaving the school without answers. Some of them not knowing if their friends, their loved ones, their classmates were impacted by this.
Yeah, we're going to go live now to our Molly Oak, who is out there on the ground. She's been out there for some time speaking with family members. And Molly, this is really just a difficult situation for anyone showing up there with their heart in their throat, wondering what is going on and why.
First time that I checked in with you all, that the only thing that rivals the amount of law enforcement here on scene is just the amount of loved ones that are trying to get there. I want to step aside so you can see a helicopter air evacuation life team, it looks like it says on the side, is lifting off here from the scene again as we work to figure out more details of all that's happening here. The GBI has told us that this is not only a local investigation but also a federal and state investigation. I want to go back to what I was saying earlier though, just the amount of parents we've seen. We've had people, neighbors, friends of family members tell us that they parked their car, had to walk 2 miles, 3 miles just to get to the school, just to try to lay some eyes on their loved ones, to know that they're okay. I mean, just off camera, I can't tell you the amount of hugs I've shared with people when they've told me that they found out that their child is okay, that their grandchild is okay, that their neighbor's child is okay. So when you talk about the impact that this type of event has on not only a school but also just the community, we've seen neighbors stepping in because they may be 30 minutes closer than a parent to come and rush over here just to make sure that their friend's child is okay. Now again, when we talk about the kids, they are on the football field right now. That's what parents are telling me, that the kids were moved over to the football field for safety and also just to be spoken to. One parent tells me that one of the kids, he was a senior, said he was in the 10th grade hallway, though that's where his classroom happened to be, said his classroom was across the hall from a classroom where the shooting happened. She says that while she was able to see him and talk with him for a little bit, make sure he was okay physically, she said mentally he's pretty shaken up, but she did say that he heard that gunfire, and she said now the GBI is interviewing students, so it may be a couple of hours before parents can physically take those students and then bring them home to safety, which is a different level of safety than being at a school where something like this just happened. It's to have that kid home with you and in your arms. That's a sentiment that we're hearing over and over again, not just to hear your child being safe, but also being able to physically see them and hold them. We want to get to some sound from people to better describe what's been happening out here.
Because his 12th grade class is on a 10th grade hall, he can't be released until GBI interviews everyone.
Tell me why that is.
Because they want to know what you heard, what you may saw, how you felt, just that.
You said his classroom was right across?
Yeah, he actually heard the shooting. He's like, they're shooting right across from my classroom. And his mom is en route. She's like 5 minutes away.
Okay.
So I just wanted to put eyes on him to see that he was okay, and he knows that he's safe, and God got him. I can't imagine what she's going through trying to get here in traffic to put eyes on her son.
You know, with the people that I've spoken to, they've been trying to hold it together, and you can tell they're trying to keep that strength because there's just so much going on. But you can see in their eyes, you can see in their hands that they are physically shaken up, whether it is their son, their daughter, their grandson, their granddaughter, their friend, their neighbor's kid that they may have met once or twice. This is an emotional time out here, and you're really seeing the entire community pull together. You're seeing the community pull together. You're seeing law enforcement from multiple agencies pull together. Again, we're talking local, state, and federal. I mean, just standing here, we're seeing Henry County Sheriff's Office. I'm seeing City of Monroe Police. I'm seeing Walton County Fire Rescue. I'm seeing GBI. We're seeing GSP. I see Gwinnett County Sheriff has set up a command center. So there's just sheriff, police, law enforcement from counties across the state coming in to help and try to hold this community together during so much devastation. Guys.
And you can understand why. Molly Oak Live Force there talking with parents, talking with a neighbor of one of the students who heard what happened. She mentioned in the 10th grade hallway, that student among many right now who are still at the school being interviewed by the GBI, asking what they heard, what they saw. You can see from this shot from earlier, just the sheer number of students. I believe the school is home to some 1,900 students. Many of them have now gone home with their parents or been allowed to leave. Others, again, staying behind as this investigation we know is still very much fluid and active.
And these are the stories that we're starting to hear now. Earlier in the day, I was watching our coverage from home, and I heard another loved one that Molly spoke with saying that one student was near the principal, and the principal just told them to run and don't look back. That is something that is unimaginable to hear, that your student had to be told, that your student heard gunshots across the hall. And we know right now that as you would imagine, so many family and friends are working to get to that school. Molly telling us just now that people are walking for miles to make it to the school, to reach their young students here at this high school. And that is something that will continue on through the evening as law enforcement and school officials are working to reunite family members. We see a lot of people trying to stand in the gap here for other family members, grandparents, friends, neighbors, just trying to locate and track students for other parents who are still in process of trying to get out there. And so even in the midst of this, we do see so many aspects of the community coming together, along with so many various municipalities and law enforcement agencies coming together to try and help aid in the response to this shooting.
Again, if you were just joining us, you may have noticed that the situation appears to have gotten a lot worse, a lot more serious, with 4 dead now being reported by CNN. According to law enforcement, they've spoken with and approximately 30 injured. Again, as Jennifer pointed out, we don't know if those injuries are related to gunshot wounds, but we know at least a couple of them are, according to what we've been hearing. At least 1 or 2 of those have been taken by life flight to Grady Hospital, where they are being treated. We don't know the extent of all of the injuries, and as far as the suspect, CNN reporting that the student, this person rather, is of student age. We don't know if that is a student at the school, but apparently a young person, according to CNN, is a suspect that they have in custody.
And again, there are so many questions left unanswered at this hour. We did hear from the sheriff not too long ago, but as this investigation is unfolding, we did not get many answers. The sheriff not taking questions at that point. We do expect to hear from the sheriff later on this afternoon, possibly around 4 o'clock, and hopefully at that point we can get some more information, some more details about what unfolded here, who is among those who are dead and injured, and what we know so far about the suspect who the sheriff's office says is now in custody. Jonathan, we were talking about the injuries and how it's hard to know without concrete information what those injuries include, but we know that right now there's going to be a lot of mental health situations that need to be addressed as well with these students dealing with such a thing happening in their early lives, and seeing this happen to possibly other students, teachers, and staff members at this school, people that they know and potentially saw every day. This is going to take a lot of work and support for this entire community to move forward.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Jennifer, students prepare for things like this these days. Unfortunately, it is part of going to middle school, high school, even as Cheryl pointed out, sometimes earlier, even in elementary and even preschool, you prepare for these types of drills. But you hope that you never have to actually live this out. You ever have to be in these situations. And so for many of these students, we saw them living this out today, running from gunfire, hearing gunfire, and this is what we saw unfold today at this school for these 1,900 students in the middle of what everyone described who witnessed it as a chaotic scene.
Yeah, and this story having far-reaching effects beyond just this Barrow County community, beyond just Metro Atlanta, beyond the state of Georgia. We have heard that President Joe Biden has been briefed on the situation, and we're hearing now from U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
But before we begin, I want to address the tragic shooting that occurred this morning at a high school in Winder, Georgia. We are still gathering information, but the FBI and ATF are on the scene, working with state, local, and federal partners. I'm devastated for the families who have been affected by this terrible tragedy. The Justice Department stands ready to provide any resources or support that the Winder community needs in the days ahead.
And that was U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland offering some remarks following this deadly shooting at Apalachee High School. Again, this information coming from CNN at this hour that 4 people have been killed or 4 people are dead, and that about 30 have been injured as a result of whatever unfolded out here at Apalachee High School. We have heard from Grady Hospital earlier, at least, that 1 person was being treated there with a gunshot wound. But again, we have not received many details from the sheriff's office regarding exactly what happened and how.
Yeah, and if there is any positive news at this hour, it is that the suspect is now in custody, and police have said, and they have reiterated, that the situation is now contained. We do know still a number of schools in the area, including the elementary school and middle school, are on lockdown at last check. We are waiting an update from police. They did say, at least the sheriff said, that they would be working to get those schools off lockdown and those parents allowed to come pick up their students. We are expecting another update, an official update from the sheriff around 4 o'clock this afternoon. But as of last check, there are still a number of schools on lockdown as they continue investigating and continue to have this large police presence around the high school there.
So as this investigation is in very early stages for law enforcement out there in Barrow County, we also know that a big undertaking underway right now is reuniting parents and students. And as Jonathan just mentioned, this isn't just at Apalachee High School. This is at other surrounding schools in Barrow County as well, also placed on lockdown. Parents working to get to those students as well at this hour. And so that is something that we are working to get more details on. As soon as we have more information, we'll of course continue to pass that information along to you. Any updates about this process that we learn, we will be sharing with you guys on air and online. You can also find more details always as we are continuing to follow this on our website, 11alive.com, and inside our 11 Alive News app, because this is an ongoing situation and we're continuing to get new information in moment by moment.
That's right, and we expect, again, more information to come shortly. You're looking right now at some video that we shot earlier, and you can really just see the large, incredible police presence that was there. As I mentioned earlier, we started to see more and more law enforcement, more and more medical staff, ambulances, even some medical helicopters showing up on the scene, giving us a sense of just how serious the situation was. And as we have learned within the last 20 minutes or so, it appears the number of those who have died and the number of those injured has gone up significantly from just what we knew earlier this morning.
And you talked about that medical helicopter. We even saw one live when Molly was reporting just a short time ago, still arriving out there at Apalachee High School. And so this is a situation that, while police say it's contained, it is still ongoing, still taking place. We know law enforcement are still out there on the ground going through this situation and this investigation piece by piece, because this is something that everyone in that community will no doubt want to be done precisely. You don't want any mistakes, and so we know that they will be going through this high school and whatever other outside and surrounding information they need to, with meticulous care, to make sure that this situation is something that they can answer questions for so many families really wondering why and what happened and what can be done to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
And a lot of those answers will of course come from students in terms of what happened, where it happened, and perhaps even why, if there was some sort of a fight or motive or something that may have led to the gunfire today. We did hear from our Molly Oak, according to a neighbor of one of those students that she spoke to, who was in the 10th grade hallway, at least in one of the classrooms along that hallway, who heard the gunfire, and that person, that student, is now being interviewed by the GBI, perhaps the closest eyes and ears to what unfolded today.
And that is a process that is still ongoing. We've talked about some of the reunification that has been going on out there on campus with family and students. But again, we are hearing from some parents and family members and loved ones out there on the ground that some of these students are indeed being held back in order to speak with law enforcement investigators, including members from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, to share their accounts of what they saw and what they heard today as this situation unfolded at Apalachee High School. So that is just one piece of the investigation that will help law enforcement as they move forward.
Again, just to reiterate, if you are joining us within a short time ago, we are looking at this scene from Apalachee High School in Barrow County, which is a school right here, this high school of about 1,900 students, about an hour or so outside of Atlanta. But as I mentioned, you have seen law enforcement come from all over, really not just Atlanta area, but beyond, law enforcement and state officials. As the governor mentioned earlier, he is directing all necessary and available state resources to the school to respond, especially considering how serious of a situation we know this has grown to be. So you no doubt are seeing a lot of law enforcement there from all across our state.
And Jonathan, you mentioned that this is about an hour or so away from Atlanta, yet and still we are learning that Atlanta public schools are adding extra security, doing extra work to make sure that their families have a little bit of peace of mind as the situation unfolds in our Metro Atlanta community. And so that's something that we are likely seeing across the state as this unfolds. And we know so many things that happen to one of us happen to all of us. And so we are certain that these other school districts are keeping Barrow County schools in their thoughts and prayers and reaching out to assist in whatever manners they can as well with this process that's going to be ongoing for the district handling this situation in the days, weeks, and months ahead.
And when you hear about these types of calls, and we do often sometimes in our business, and you all do as viewers, you hear about active shooters, you hear about lockdowns, and you just hope and you pray that this is not the case. Unfortunately, today when we heard from law enforcement after they got to the school around 10 o'clock this morning, they realized this was a very serious situation. This was an active shooter, and as we're learning within the last 30 minutes or so, this was perhaps bigger and more dire of a situation than any of us thought, just looking at this earlier.
And I think from the coverage that we had earlier in the afternoon or earlier in the morning, I think there were signals that this could potentially be even worse than people would hope or imagine, just by the sheer volume of law enforcement response that we saw out there on the ground. And when you hear the words hard lockdown, we hear different levels of lockdowns with schools, whether it is police activity nearby. Schools may go on lockdown just for safety, but when you hear a hard lockdown, that is something that automatically triggers something in you that, you know, this is a very serious situation. Earlier in the day, NBC News reported that 2 people were dead and 4 injured. But again, now at this hour, CNN News is reporting 4 dead and about 30 injured. So this information is continuing to develop and update. We did hear from the sheriff not too long ago. The sheriff keeping a lot of information close to the vest at this point, not sharing many details, including information about those who may have died and those who were injured. Again, we are hoping and expecting to hear from the sheriff once again, maybe around 4 o'clock. And he said that he hopes that he may be able to share more concrete information at that point.
Our Molly Oak is still there at the school. She's been there for hours now. Molly, we know when this all started to unfold this afternoon, there was a heavy police presence. A lot of those students were still on campus waiting to be reunited with their parents. Can you describe where things are right now? Are we still seeing the large presence in terms of students and law enforcement?
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm actually going to stay off camera while I speak with you all just so you see this scene. We are directly across the street from the school, and typically when we have breaking news like this, we see a really heavy police presence when we first get here, and we arrived hours ago, and then that starts to dwindle. It has not dwindled a bit. If anything, we've seen more law enforcement show up. Even when the photographer and I were driving here, we passed probably about a dozen police officers, law enforcement passed us on their way to the school. That has continued to happen. The only thing that we've seen maybe moving in and out fluidly, we've seen a couple of helicopters since we first got here, but we are talking about multiple agencies. The GBI telling us that this is local, state, and federal, all part of this investigation. I have seen police and sheriff's offices from multiple counties here, along with GBI and FBI as well. So we know this is a mass investigation, and we've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Not only do we have a ton of law enforcement here, but the one thing that is competing with that right now, with the amount, is the amount of loved ones that are showing up on scene. Now, we have seen significantly less since we've been here, probably in the past 30 minutes or so. When we first arrived here, we saw people basically just parking their cars wherever they could find a spot, grabbing their stuff and just walking. I talked with one woman who said she parked and walked 2.5 miles just to try to lay some eyes on her neighbor's child, because that neighbor was about an hour away. We've talked with grandparents, parents, loved ones, again, neighbors. So this is really impacting the entire community out here, Jonathan.
Our Molly Oak live for us. Thank you so much for giving us an update. As Molly said, this is really what it has looked like for the last 3 or 4 hours, as police have again reiterated that this is still very much early. In fact, the sheriff said it may take several days for them to really get to the bottom of the initial answers as to what happened here.
That's right. And in our speaking with Molly, you know, we have been hearing different stories from family members and loved ones out there on campus. That neighbor that you heard Molly speak of saying that the student she was there to just check on, to lay eyes on, being interviewed along with so many others right now by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And that is just a piece of this investigation that will take days or weeks or months for law enforcement to shore everything together, to answer all of these questions, to dot all these I's and cross all these T's, to get answers for the community about what took place here today.
And again, the priority right now, according to the sheriff, of course, getting some of these parents who are at these schools waiting in traffic perhaps to get reunited with their students, getting them reunited. That, I mean, as a parent, you just obviously know that that is priority. You want to make sure that your child is okay. But as we're hearing, some 30 injured. You would assume that a good number of those are students. We don't know the breakdown of students, staff, teachers, but again, everyone in that school perhaps knows someone who might have been affected by this. This is not a huge school, 1,900 students, which is of course a big high school, but you would imagine that everyone perhaps knows someone who might have been affected by this.
Yeah, and when we talk about checking on your loved one, hearing from a text message or getting a phone call certainly doesn't feel like enough in a situation like this. People want to see and hug and hold their loved ones following something like this, and unfortunately, according to reporting that we are learning today, some people will not be able to do that tonight. CNN reporting 4 dead, about 30 injured, and again, these are numbers that we're continuing to watch because they have shifted some during the day, and we are working to get more concrete information, more details for you, but again, we are thinking that we may not get any information from the sheriff's office again until the 4 o'clock hour. That's about 3 hours from now as we're approaching, well, maybe 2 hours from now as we're approaching 2 o'clock here. And so again, we will be following that. We have several crews on the ground across Metro Atlanta working this story to get you answers, because so many people are really just asking so many questions, why and how. And those are the things that law enforcement are working together. You see right here images from earlier in the day, the students that were out there on that football field, you know, such a stark contrast from what they were likely seeing and experiencing not too long ago. The school year just starting, just finishing up the Labor Day holiday, football back in action, and this is such a stark contrast from what these students were probably so excited about on campus, living their lives, and now this has happened, and it's really an event that really truly changes you and shakes you.
Yeah, it really does. And you're right. I mean, you look at the football field students, they should be getting ready for a Friday night football game. They should be getting ready for a test perhaps, but they are in the middle of just a chaotic emergent situation that has really dealt a huge blow not only to this school but this entire community. As we know, every school in the district, at least at some point today, was on lockdown because of this. We heard from Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens not too long ago in a statement saying that he has bolstered security at a number of Atlanta public schools and also offering to send any of Atlanta's resources that way as well, knowing that when something like this happens, it no doubt affects the school and the surrounding community. But as a parent, as you know, a student anywhere, you are affected by this, especially when it happens within your metro area in particular.
And we talked so much about the injuries and how it's impossible at this point to know without concrete information from law enforcement what those injury levels are. But I can't help but continue to go back to the mental health aspect for these students. Some of them already reporting from family members and friends with our Molly Oak that they heard the gunshots across the hall. Some of these students may never have even heard gunshots before. And this is something that will be etched in their brains for the rest of their lives now. And so we are certainly thinking of these students and sending them our strength and support, because this is something that is going to be dealt with as an ongoing issue for the remainder of the school year and for the remainder of their lives as these students try to figure out how to move forward, as well as the staff and the teachers and the administrators there. You know, your school family is your family. You're with these people day in and day out for months on end. And in a community like Winder, you get to know each other. You know that your neighbors, everyone knows each other, and it's unimaginable, as you mentioned, that so many people there will have some sort of connection to what unfolded today.
And you wonder if perhaps the person that you had class with or that you know well or a teacher is affected by this, because at this point we have not had any confirmation of the ages or the names or grade levels of any of the people who've been impacted. So for a lot of these students who are leaving today, they are left with just so many questions, left with heartbreak, but again, a lot of questions, wondering if perhaps their friend, someone they care about, someone they love, one of their teachers, is one of those impacted and perhaps even dead from this tragedy.
Yeah, and it's hard to say at this point, because we heard from one of the neighbors of a student that this may have taken place on the 10th grade hallway, but that student was a senior. And so it's even impossible with the limited information that we are getting on the ground to know who all may have been impacted. We don't know if there were staff members, teachers, students. We don't know the ratios of who may have been impacted here. So again, hopefully that is information that we will be able to bring to you in the next 2 hours or so when we hear from the sheriff's office once again. But again, as we talk about this situation, we know that this investigation is going to take quite some time. This isn't something that we're going to get all of the answers that we are looking for today or even tomorrow, as we know that the Barrow County Sheriff's Office is being joined by other local, state, and federal partners to investigate and try to piece together what happened.
And that next update, Jennifer, as we've been telling people, in case you were just joining us, according to the sheriff, he says we are going to try to get you another update at 4 o'clock. He didn't promise that would happen, but that's when they're hoping to get another update. He knows that you all want answers, and of course, media, we have our newscasts at 4 o'clock, and so hoping to get the information out to you. But what we know so far, again, in case you were just tuning in, this all started around 9:30 this morning. That's when the first calls, according to police, came. They arrived on the scene shortly thereafter, realizing that this was an active shooter situation, and we saw police surrounding the school and agencies showing up from around the school. We do know one suspect now in custody, and according to CNN, they are now reporting 4 dead and approximately 30 injured. We know at least one of those injured was taken by medical helicopter or life flight to Grady Hospital, which is a level 1 trauma center, so that would lead you to believe that this was a serious injury, obviously, but we again don't know the extent of that injury.
All right, we want to get back out to some sound that our Doug Richards has been gathering, speaking with family members and students out there on the ground. And we understand this information comes from a 10th grader who heard what went on today. Let's take a listen.
It was just like a loud boom, as if a locker had slammed. So my teacher thought it was just like some kid acting foolish. So then she took a peek outside, and then we heard repeatedly the banging again, and that's when we could identify it was a gun. And then the hard lockdown was placed, and then we ran to the back of the classroom, turned off the lights. I was shaking, scared, and I didn't have my phone on me, and I couldn't communicate with my mom for half an hour. And I didn't know what was going to happen, because you could hear the gunfires right down the hall. So I don't know if it was like the last chance I had to talk with her, but luckily I'm here.
And you were just listening to a 10th grader at Apalachee High School speaking about his experience today when that gunfire rang out in the school, saying it sounded like a locker being banged shut, and they thought it was a one-off initially until the sound continued, and then they immediately went into those procedures that they practice about how to respond if a shooting happened, running to the back of the classroom, turning off the lights. The poor student saying he didn't even have a cell phone on him, so he couldn't reach his mother. And if you were looking at that screen, you could just tell the anguish that mother had. Even despite the joy of seeing her son right now and holding him, they were just holding on to each other even as he spoke about what happened.
You could really feel it through the screen just looking at that image. And he told his story, again, turning off the lights, sort of hiding in place, waiting for this to all be over. We also heard from other students that they ran. They heard the gunfire, they heard something happening, and they ran. You know, when you're trained in these sorts of drills, there's different scenarios and different ways that you handle this. Sometimes the best situation is to lock the door and to hide in place. Other times it's to get away from the threat. And so some of these students doing what they were taught, trying to get away from what was happening. But it is just harrowing. It is just heartbreaking hearing that directly from a student who witnessed this just hours ago.
I know, and unfortunately we will hear more and more stories like this as the days continue to move forward along with this investigation. But similar stories that we heard from another woman who was checking on her neighbor's son, that he was in that 10th grade hallway and heard the gunshots ringing out across from that classroom. And so we're starting to hear some similar stories out there of students taking cover as those gunshots ring out.
Right. It just really is. It's just hard to imagine going through that. As a lot of these students, you prepare for these things. You hope that you never have to actually do it in real time and in real life when a situation like this is unfolding. You're taking a look from above of our sky tracker. This was earlier, shortly after this happened, when a lot of the students were released out onto the football field. A lot of them at that point didn't know exactly what was going on. You can see, if you look lower in the picture, I believe that's a stretcher, one of many that we saw there on the scene. We saw several people, several students being taken away. We don't know, again, the extent of the injuries, but we know there were a number of students taken away by ambulance and by helicopter to be treated. And as of last reporting, CNN reporting 30 injured at this point, 4 dead.
And that's a number that has shifted as we have continued to follow this story for you today. Earlier in the day, NBC News reported 2 dead and 4 injured, but again, that number has increased to what CNN is reporting now was 4 dead and 30 injured. As you are looking at your screen, these are images from earlier in the day, and you can just see the sheer volume of law enforcement that responded out here to Apalachee High School early today, as this reports of what was reported to be a gunshot started to come in starting around 9:30, those first calls today. We saw countless numbers of law enforcement vehicles. We now know that they are not just from that immediate area, but from all across metro Atlanta, including state and federal partners as well, responding to this high school as this situation has continued to unfold and as this investigation is getting underway and continuing. We do know from the sheriff's office that 1 suspect is in custody, but there has not been any information from the sheriff's office on who that suspect is, whether it's a student, a teacher. We don't have information from the sheriff's office, at least, about any particular descriptors of who that person is, an age, a reason for their connection to the school, if there even was one. So those are just some of the questions that still remain at this hour that we are hoping to get for you. Again, we are hoping that we may hear from the sheriff again around 4 o'clock. Again, that is something we will bring to you both on air and online as soon as we get the word that we will hear from the sheriff, if and when that does happen again.
And Jennifer, you're absolutely correct. We don't have much information at this hour on the suspect other than that person is in custody, according to the sheriff. Now, CNN is reporting, according to some of their law enforcement sources, that that suspect is of student age. That's how they described them, but not, again, saying whether they were or are a student at the school or have any connection to the school. But at this point, we do know that that young person, according to CNN, is in custody. And
we see our Molly Oga standing by. She is getting ready for another live report just to kind of let us know what she is hearing and seeing out there on the ground at Apalachee High School. Molly, are you ready?
Hey guys, so we've talked about the amount of law enforcement out here. We've talked about the amount of parents out here. Well, now we're seeing students and talking with them as well. I just talked with one kid. He's a 10th grade student. He told me he heard the gunfire. I'm going to step aside because we are right across from the high school, so you can again see just all the amount of law enforcement that's here. Gwinnett County even passing me now. So again, local, state, and federal all here today. But that 10th grader telling me that he started hearing gunshots. His teacher told them to get down and get in the corner. He recounted that he was just about to go to the bathroom, and the words he told me were, "I thought I was going to die." It's tough for me to talk about this one because I have shared a lot of hugs off camera right now with parents and students who are okay, but we know there are some parents who are not getting that news. That student did tell me that he knows a couple of the people that were shot. He's worried that one of the people he thinks was shot is also one of the ones that died. So our thoughts and prayers are going out to not only the students, the staff, the faculty, but the parents and really this entire community. Because as we said, it's not only parents that are coming out here to come check on the kids, it's neighbors, it's grandparents, it's loved ones, it's friends. We talked with one neighbor who said she walked 2.5 miles just to come and check on her friend's kid to make sure that he was okay and just lay some eyes on him. She had told me that he was in the principal's office and the principal told him to run and not look back. We've talked with other students and parents who have said that they heard the gunshots, parents getting the text from their kids, not even wanting to believe it's real, and then questioning if they were going to get to see their kid. They're finally getting to see and touch and feel that they're okay for some parents out here, but there is a ton of emotion. I think we have some sound from you for some of those students. I want to toss that now if we can get that. So we are still working on getting that sound, but again, just the overall emotion here for not only the students, but the parents, but also the law enforcement. You really feel a sense of heaviness out here outside of the high school today, guys.
All right, Molly, and let us know when you're ready with that sound, because we really would love to hear from some of the people with their reactions and their emotions and what they saw and heard tonight, or really rather earlier in the day as this unfolds. So Molly, thank you so much. We can certainly feel from you the emotion of the day out there. So much going through the minds and hearts of the people out here in Barrow County as this continues.
It really does take on a different type of emotion when you start hearing the words directly from those students. And Molly and Doug and some of our other reporters out there have been talking directly to students. We just heard from, according to Molly, that student saying that they were told to get in the corner and they could hear the gunfire, and they believe that someone they know was shot, and perhaps one of the ones who was fatally injured. And that's when it really gets real for a lot of people, because it's not just a shooting. This is someone you know. This is someone you have class with. And just to hear that from students, I think really you can understand why it brings that type of emotion out.
Potentially someone you may have grown up with and gone to elementary, middle, and now high school with. And we hear these situations all across the country so many times. And as you said, it just becomes real when it's right here in your own community. We do know that this story is having wide-reaching effects. We heard from U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland earlier making comments and sending his thoughts and offering assistance. But right now we also understand that the White House will be providing a briefing very shortly. We will, of course, bring you that as soon as we know somebody comes and steps to the stadium. We understand President Joe Biden has been briefed on everything that's going on. It's not clear right now who from the White House will be speaking, but again, we will bring you that as soon as we see someone moving toward the podium. But again, this just signals how serious of a situation this really has become as it continues to balloon. Unfortunately, we have seen the numbers increase, and reporting from CNN, 4 dead, 30 injured, and we will, of course, bring you this briefing as soon as it gets underway.
And we're also expecting to hear from the sheriff in Winder around 4 o'clock this afternoon, perhaps before that, but that's when we're told the next update could come. So again, we are awaiting news updates from both the White House and from the law enforcement there in Winder. And I wouldn't be surprised to, at some point today, hear from Governor Brian Kemp. He did release a statement, but knowing him, he will likely either be there later today or at least issue some type of statement, considering how serious this has gotten to be.
Exactly. And again, we have been hearing from law enforcement and state officials across Georgia who have been sending their support and their thoughts to the Barrow County community following news of this shooting out there at Apalachee High School. You're looking at images that we got from earlier in the day, some of them from the ground, some of them from our 11 Alive Sky Tracker, as we have been keeping an eye on what has been going on and learning more and more information as the hours have passed. This image right here on your screen gives you a view of what we've been talking about, just the sheer volume of law enforcement responding to this situation, not just from Barrow County, but also from surrounding areas. And not just law enforcement, we also know that first responders from other communities were sharing the load as well, working to help in response to this shooting, what we understand is a shooting. And we are just now seeing that the GBI has now confirmed 4 people dead, 9 hospitalized. That information coming again from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation of 4 people dead, 9 hospitalized. We heard earlier in the day from Grady Hospital that they had at least one person who had a gunshot wound that had been transported from Barrow County to Atlanta for treatment at Grady Hospital. And again, we are just working to get you new details, new information, piece by piece, as it continues to come in and be confirmed.
And as you mentioned earlier, Jennifer, we don't know the extent of those injuries. 9 hospitalized would lead you to believe that there is some type of injury where, of course, they would need to be seeking medical care, but there could have been other students who were hurt, perhaps, in the chaos of running. We just don't know. So that could be perhaps why we saw some of the larger numbers with 30 injured, according to CNN. But again, the latest information from the GBI that we can confirm: 4 dead, 9 hospitalized, and the suspect, again, if you were just joining us, is in custody. We do not know any details about who that suspect is or any details about what led up to the shooting today that happened, according to police, around 9:30 today. We have been hearing on the ground within the last hour from a lot of students who witnessed this. We have heard that it happened, according to students, around the 10th grade hallway. Several students reported hearing the gunfire this morning. Students telling us that they ran in the corner, they turned off the lights. Many of them ran for cover if they were in an area where they could do so. But this is all contained, according to police at this point. And now the investigation really starts as to what happened here, why it happened, and interviewing those students who are still at the school is a big part of figuring all of that out.
And you mentioned those interviews. We heard from a neighbor who was checking on a friend's child out there at Apalachee High School that the GBI is, in fact, interviewing students out there at this hour. We know that the unification process has begun and that some family members are being reunited with their students, but we also know that some students are being held back so that they can, in fact, be interviewed, so that the GBI can learn from those students what they saw, what they may have heard, what they may have viewed, and any sort of information that they may have that can help with this investigation. So we are learning that some of that is undergoing and in process out there at Apalachee High School.
And again, we are still waiting to hear from the White House, I believe. Or I believe we're going to go straight to the White House for an update from the White House. Let's listen in.
Yet another horrific shooting. Now, as a parent myself, I know the anxiety that comes with sending your kid out into the world every day, living with the real fear of the worst can happen. So please know that our hearts are with those families in Winder, Georgia, who are forced to face this act of senseless violence. I want to let you know that the President and the Vice President have both been briefed, and his administration will continue coordinating with federal, state, and local officials as we receive more information. We're grateful for the brave first responders who are on the scene, and we stand by, we stand ready to provide support as needed. As the President has said time and time again, this is not normal. This is not normal. Students and teachers deserve to know that their schools are safe. They should focus on learning, not lockdowns. While the President and Vice President have taken historic action to reduce gun violence, more must be done to keep our schools and communities safe. We continue to call on Congress to do something, We need universal background checks. We need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, require safe storage of firearms, invest in violence prevention programs, and pass a national red flag law. Enough is enough, and I cannot say this enough, which is enough is enough. We cannot allow this to happen in our communities. We cannot allow this to happen in our schools. So we have to do everything that we can to keep our children safe, to keep the people who are supposed to protect our children? Were our children, who are they supposed to learn from, safe? And enough is enough. Congress needs to act. Now, turning to my colleague from NSC, who's here to discuss the latest Biden-Harris administration actions today against foreign actors attempting to covertly influence our elections and undermine confidence in our democratic institution. Admiral John Kirby will discuss the coordinated actions we are taking in addition to other foreign policy news of the day. Admiral? Thank you.
And you have been listening to Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, speaking about this unfolding shooting at Apalachee High School. Right now we have confirmed with the GBI that 4 people are dead and 9 hospitalized. And the White House press secretary saying that their hearts are with families, that President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have been briefed on the situation. She called this a senseless act of violence, saying that she is grateful for first responders, but also saying that this is not normal and that more must be done. She said enough is enough and called on Congress, saying they need to act, and also mentioned some specific things like universal background checks and violence prevention programs that do need to happen. But again, that's what we are just hearing from the White House press secretary in response to the shooting at Apalachee High School in Barrow County, Georgia.
And just as the press secretary was speaking, President Biden and the White House also releasing a statement reiterating some of the same things that he said, really saying that what should have been a joyous back-to-school season in Winder has now turned into another horrific reminder of how gun violence continues to tear our communities apart. The president going on to say, in part with this statement, students across the country are learning how to duck and cover instead of how to read and write. We cannot continue to accept this as normal. And that is what we heard from Karine Jean-Pierre saying twice, reiterating this is not normal. But sadly, this has become something that some of us have become all too familiar with seeing, as we have seen yet another school shooting happen, this time right here in our community.
And again, we do want to reiterate that we are just confirming within the last 30 minutes or so with the GBI that 4 people have lost their lives today at Apalachee High School as a result of this. 9 people hospitalized. We do not know at this hour the extent of the injuries of those who have been hospitalized, but we are working to gather more information. We heard from the sheriff earlier today. Not many details given there, but we are expecting and hoping that we will hear from the sheriff once again around 4 o'clock, and we'll of course bring you that briefing as soon as it begins, just as we did with that briefing from the White House.
And Jennifer, you mentioned earlier a lot of people who've been watching our coverage and who were tuning in just a few hours ago. You could see just how serious this was. It seemed, sort of every 15 minutes we would see another sort of group of law enforcement show up, more ambulances. We saw the medical helicopters, leading us to believe that this was a lot more serious than the initial call perhaps suggested. And again, these numbers really underscoring that 4 dead, 9 hospitalized, perhaps more than that even injured, according to some other reporting we've heard. But this time, 2:25, this has been unfolding since about 9:30 this morning, and there's still a lot of answers we don't have, and we may not have those answers today, and maybe not even by the end of this week. The sheriff suggesting that this is still very early, still very fluid, and he said that he may be able to give some additional information when they talk to us around 4 o'clock. But at this point, we're just going to have to wait and see what else we learn today.
We have learned from the sheriff's office that 1 suspect is in custody. We do know that. However, we have not received any information from the sheriff's office about who that suspect might be. We don't have any concrete information, at least not from the sheriff's office, about if this person is a student or not, if this person had any connection to the school. We do not have any of those details at this hour, but once we do learn them, we will of course share them with you both on air and online. But that's just one piece of this that we are waiting and hoping to hear soon, as more and more people are hopefully being reunited with their students out there on Apalachee High School campus. And we do know that some of those students are being held back in order to assist in this investigation, to speak with members of law enforcement, particularly with the GBI. And again, this is something you see right here on your screen, this visual from earlier today, the sheer number of students that were evacuated out of that school, taken to the football court, the football field there for a safe space until they could be reunited. And so that is underway right now. We have heard from some family members and friends who say their student is being interviewed. And again, that reunification process is also underway. We've heard from our Molly Oak out there on the ground with one parent at least saying that she walked 2.5 miles just to get to the school to make sure that her child was okay.
We've heard that, and we've heard neighbors stepping in where perhaps parents could not get to the school as quickly, and neighbors saying, I'll go check on your child just to make sure they're okay. Parents, again, have been allowed for the last couple hours or so to go and reunite with their students. Sadly, some of them won't be able to do that, as we have heard that 4 dead and 9 hospitalized. We don't have the breakdown on how many of those who are injured or those casualties are students, but what we have been hearing for the last hour or so, direct accounts, direct stories from students who were nearby or in the 10th grade hallway and heard the gunfire. Perhaps some of them even saw this unfold. One of the students we just heard from about 30 minutes ago said that he could hear the gunfire. He ran into the corner. The teacher turned off the light and they waited for this all to be over with, not realizing just how horrible this would turn out to be. That student also saying that he was about to go to the bathroom, but he didn't, and he hid in the classroom. And other students earlier in the day saying that they ran because they didn't know what was going on. So we're starting to hear more firsthand accounts as these stories are also being shared directly with law enforcement as they try to figure out the exact details and the timing of how this unfolded.
And Jonathan, not too long ago, we heard from a student holding on to his mother, a 10th grade student sharing his account of what he experienced today, hearing those gunshots in the hallway. But you could just see them holding on to each other. And I think that's what so many families will be doing tonight, those who can. And unfortunately, we know there are those who will not be able to do that tonight, with the GBI now confirming 4 people have been killed. As
we heard from our Molly Oak, who is still there on the scene, a considerable police presence still there. We do know, according to the sheriff, that the scene there at the high school is contained. They have the suspect in custody, but their investigation still is very much starting. They need to figure out many more details. They're collecting evidence. They're talking with students. So I would assume that they're going to be there for a long time. This is still early. Even though this happened hours ago, they still have a lot of people to talk to and a lot of ground to cover as they try to figure out what happened, perhaps even reviewing if there are any sort of cameras in the school, what happened and how this happened and unfolded.
And I'm just looking on social media. The GBI again has confirmed 4 dead, 9 people taken to what they're saying are various hospitals with injuries. There's no direct information, no confirmation about the type of injuries that some of these people have sustained. The GBI also tweeting out on or posting on X that the suspect is in custody and that person is alive. There seem to have been some reports that a suspect had been quote unquote neutralized, but the GBI saying that that information is inaccurate. So we can verify that a suspect is alive and in custody right now. Again, that information coming from the GBI.
And perhaps we'll learn more about that suspect when we hear from the sheriff around 4 o'clock this afternoon. A lot of people had questions. In fact, our Doug Richards asked, is the suspect a student? Is it an adult? Is that person a student at the school or have any affiliation with the school? The sheriff saying he's not ready to answer those questions just yet, but that's a question that we have asked. We're also waiting to get more information about other schools that have been placed on lockdown earlier today. Every single school in Barrow County had been on lockdown right after this unfolded. The sheriff said one of their goals in the next couple hours was to release some of those students. I guess they're going to do that, orderly, because they obviously don't want every parent in the district racing to the schools at once. So when we get updates on how that release and how that lockdown will be lifted at those other schools, we'll keep you updated on that as well.
And of course, that is something that would typically be standard with any sort of situation, these lockdowns. And, Jonathan, we were talking earlier in the broadcast here that normally if there is something, we do hear about schools going into lockdown. Even if it has nothing to do with the school, they may place a school on lockdown if there's police activity in the nearby vicinity, just to make sure that they're taking an abundance of caution. But earlier in the day when we heard the word hard lockdown, I think that was a signal to so many of us that this was a different type of situation, that this was more serious, and unfortunately that has turned out to be true. The GBI confirming 4 dead, 9 hospitalized at various hospitals across our metro Atlanta region, if you're just joining us. And again, we have learned that a suspect is in custody. That person is alive, but we don't have any other confirmed details about who that suspect is. We are expecting to hear from the sheriff's office hopefully around 4 o'clock. We did hear from the sheriff earlier today. Not many details shared with us at that point. The sheriff saying that he hopes to speak again around 4 o'clock and hopes to be able to provide more information and hopes to, at that point, be able to answer questions from the media. And we'll, of course, bring you that as soon as we get word that it is coming and as soon as we get word that it is about to take place.
Again, the sheriff really the only one at this point authorized to speak on the investigation, but we have heard and received statements from Governor Brian Kemp along with Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens emphasizing the resources from the Atlanta area will be sent to this area, along with additional patrols being stepped up at Atlanta public schools in light of what's happened. We also, within the last 20 minutes, heard from the White House, from the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, and others. But again, the only specific information about the investigation has been coming from the sheriff, and around 4 o'clock, he's expected to provide another update on that from Winder. Again, as I said, I would not be surprised to hear from Governor Brian Kemp again this afternoon as well.
I think that is something that we will likely get at some point later on this evening, and of course we'll bring you that both on air and online as it comes in from Governor Brian Kemp or anybody else. We will share those thoughts and those messages with you as well. You know, Jonathan, you mentioned that the White House mentioned this during a briefing not too long ago. We brought you that live here just a few moments ago. The press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, saying that their hearts are with families. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have been briefed on this ongoing situation, calling this an act of senseless violence, saying that they are grateful for first responders and all the hard work that is being done in response, but saying that this is not normal and more must be done.
Right now, you are looking at some video from earlier this afternoon, shortly after this all unfolded at the high school. Again, the first calls came in around 9:30 this morning. Police were quickly on the scene around 10 o'clock or a little before, and we started seeing the police presence grow, really presence from all over our state. We saw officers from Gwinnett County, of course, the city of Atlanta, ATF, GBI, really any agency that you can think of was on the scene or is still on the scene earlier today as they really worked to not only secure the area and figure out what was going on, but also to transport those who were injured to where they needed to be. We saw a number of medical helicopters also showing up on the scene. But again, the latest information we can confirm, according to the GBI, is 4 dead and 9 hospitalized, perhaps more than that even injured. We're waiting for another update to come in from the sheriff in Winder.
And we saw from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation posting on X that these people have been taken to various hospitals. We know from Grady Hospital earlier in today that they have at least one patient who suffered a gunshot wound from Apalachee High School. That number may have increased at this point, and we also don't have further confirmation about where else these people have been taken other than the GBI saying that 9 people have been hospitalized at various facilities across our metro Atlanta region. We will bring you that information as soon as we get that confirmation. But right now, what we do know is that families are being reunited with their students, both at Apalachee High School, but also that's working to be done at other schools in Barrow County, as well as other schools were placed on lockdown as a result of this ongoing situation. We do know at this hour that some students are being held back while others have been reunited because these students are speaking with investigators or speaking with the GBI about what they saw, what they witnessed, what they heard, maybe any information that they may have that might assist them in that investigation. So that process is underway today as well.
That's right. And Jennifer, you mentioned we do know at least one of those gunshot victims is is at Grady Memorial Hospital, a level 1 trauma center. CNN also reporting, according to their sources, that at least one adult has been taken to Piedmont Athens Regional Hospital in North Georgia, but we don't know the extent of the injuries of that person. We just know, again, that, as you mentioned, these victims have been taken to multiple hospitals. So again, we are at least knowing between Grady and that hospital in the Athens area as well.
And we know that there are so many questions that so many of you have at home as you're watching this, as you're reaching out to loved ones, and we are working to confirm as much of that information as we can and bring it to you as soon as we have it, both here on air and then online on 11alive.com and inside our 11 Alive News app. We are working to get you that information as soon as it comes in. We also do want to share with you, if you're just joining us, that we are hoping that we can hear from the Sheriff's Office once again around 4 o'clock, and we will carry that for you both on air and online.
And as we know, with situations like this is truly breaking news. Things can change, as we have seen them change really hour by hour. We have learned more information. We have, in terms of where the lockdowns stand, in terms of the number of hospitalized, injured, and those who unfortunately are dead from this situation. This is all unfolding. It is changing. We are working. We have our newsroom working. We have reporters there on the ground at the hospital waiting and trying to gather more information as well. So we are bringing you the very latest just as soon as we get that information as well.
And Jonathan, I'm just getting some information from our newsroom that there will be a Winder Community Vigil tonight at 7 p.m. This is going to take place at Jug Tavern Park. That's at 113 East Athens Street in Winder, Georgia. The city of Winder is going to open Jug Tavern Park. This is going to be opened up to the community tonight at 7 for an opportunity for everyone to come together and grieve over everything that has taken place today. Grieve those 4 lives lost, according to the GBI, and I'm sure offer up some prayers and support for those who have been hospitalized and the families who have lost loved ones out there today. So again, this is a Winder Community Vigil, the city opening up Jug Tavern Park to the community this evening at 7 p.m. for that community vigil. So if you are one who is in that area, or you'd like to travel to that area to offer your respects and to offer your support, that would be an opportune time to do it at Jug Tavern Park, 7 p.m. tonight. That is 113 East Athens Street in Winder, Georgia.
Yeah, and you can imagine that a lot of comfort, a lot of prayers, a lot of support will be needed in that community, not just tonight at this vigil, but beyond in the weeks and months to come. After something like this, just, you know, it really does rock the community for an incredible time. I want to go out right now to 11 Alive's Doug Richards. Doug, you have been there at the high school really for a couple of hours now. You've been speaking with students and with some of the parents out there. What else are you learning?
Well, we're learning that the students, based on their own characterization of what happened, had a very traumatic experience, and that there was, as some of them said, hard to know initially what was going on. When they heard the initial gunshots, it was hard to know exactly that that's what that was. But then we talked to some students who were in a classroom adjacent to where at least some of the shooting took place, and they had very traumatic experiences. Hearing the gunshots, not really knowing whether the gunshots were going to get closer to them, but recognizing that it was gunfire, seeing signs on the displays that are in each classroom that said that they were on a hard lockdown and indicating that there was a genuine emergency taking place. The teachers putting them into the lockdown protocol, where they piled into corners of classrooms in order to sort of minimize the possible exposure as targets. We talked with one young lady by the name of Zoe Gray, who described what she went through in her classroom. Was there ever any moment when you thought you were in danger?
Oh yeah, I thought I was gonna die. It was like, it sounded so close. I'm sure it was, because it was right near, I don't know exactly which door, but you hear bang, bang, like they're kind of like they're trying to get in a door. It wasn't our door, but I'm sitting right by the door, and so it sounds like they're trying to get in, but I don't know if it's shots or they're just trying to get in. We were just having a normal day. It wasn't anything different than what we were used to. I was they usually make you put up your phone, but I was charging mine today, so I luckily had it, and that was just normal. And then bang, 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 hard lockdown. And the teachers were phenomenal. Like, we have a special teacher for the blind kid, and then we have our normal teacher, and they were very good at doing their job of keeping us calm.
I talked with probably a half dozen students as they were leaving here. Many of them were with their parents, and the parents gave their blessings to us to talk to them. Almost all of them said that they were convinced that there was more than one gunman. One student told us that they heard shots from different locations within the school. One student told us that when they exited out the hall, actually a couple of students told us when they exited out the hallway, they saw the body of somebody in the hallway who they believed to be one of the student gunmen. So we know that the GBI is telling us that one gunman is in custody. The students at least left here convinced that there was more than one gunman, and that there was and that one of them was killed by police in the course of the investigation. The authorities have not confirmed that, and the students are saying it just based on their observations. Student told us that the one person that they believed was a gunman laying deceased in the hallway actually had a firearm, which she described as an assault rifle, on the ground with him when they led the students past the person deceased in the hallway. So it's hard to tell. Nobody knew. We talked to one student who said that he knew a gunman casually, didn't describe anything particularly unusual about this particular person who he believed was a gunman. But there's a lot of information flying around, obviously, in here, some of which may not be true, but some of which is gathered by people who said they saw firsthand in the hallway as they were evacuating their classrooms, just based on evidence that they saw. The good news, of course, is that it appears the danger's over. The students are casually exiting the school now, mostly with their parents, very relieved that this is over, and not planning to come back to school tomorrow is what they're telling us. Back to you.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. And we do want to give you some information from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They are saying that the suspect in this shooting is in custody and that that person is alive. They say that reports that the suspect has been neutralized are inaccurate. They're also saying that reports of additional shootings taking place at nearby schools are incorrect. Again, any reports of additional shootings taking place at nearby schools in Barrow County are not correct. That information coming from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They're posting this information on X to kind of refute some information that misinformation that is out there. But again, the suspect is in custody. The suspect is alive. Any reports that the suspect has been neutralized are inaccurate, and any reports of additional shootings at nearby schools are also incorrect.
And we will likely hear that emphasized coming up in a bit when we hear from the sheriff in Winder any moment now, perhaps around 4 o'clock, though that's around the time we're expecting. So probably actually more looking at an hour from now. But again, Jennifer, you're reiterating that because we have heard a lot of information. Sometimes it is misinformation. Sometimes it is rumors. When things like this happen, you have a lot of students who witness things firsthand, students who heard something second or third hand from someone. And so there's a lot of information going around in addition to what we hear and see on social media. So the information we're providing to you is coming directly from the GBI or from law enforcement sources. And as soon as we confirm things or can, sort of knock something out that has been put out there, we can let you know that as well.
All right. And once again, what we have learned we just want to be very crystal clear with this. The GBI has confirmed 4 people have died, 9 people have been transported to various hospitals, but the suspect is alive and in custody, and there are no shootings that have taken place as a result at surrounding schools. Jonathan, we've been talking about the reunification process going on not just here at Apalachee High School, but also at other schools in Barrow County. Those processes are undergoing right now. They're underway as parents are being reunited with their students, because we know those other schools were placed on lockdown as well as a result of this shooting.
That's right. At one point, every school in Barrow County was placed on lockdown. The sheriff did say one of their goals in the next bit was to make sure that those lockdowns could be lifted and students could be reunited with their parents. We're talking about elementary schools and middle schools, so some younger students in that area. And in addition to what's happening here at the high school, where students were allowed to leave campus with their parents shortly after this happened, once they got the scene clear and got things contained. But again, the investigation far from over. In fact, it's just starting, according to the sheriff, and that is why you are still seeing a ton of police presence at the school, because they have a lot of work to do to get to the bottom of what happened, including interviewing a lot of these students. In particular, we're told a lot of the 10th grade students, because according to witnesses we've spoken to, this happened on the 10th grade hallway in the school. Many of the students actually telling us that they heard the gunfire, they had to run for cover, they turned off the lights in the classroom, they ducked, just trying to figure out what may be going on. So we're getting some of those firsthand accounts from students as really the hours go by.
We also heard from a senior who just so happened to have a class on that 10th grade hall, and so it really is difficult to know what type of student, what range of age or grade may have been more heavily impacted by this shooting directly, who may have been closer to what transpired. But again, we're receiving various accounts from students, from our reporters on the ground there at Apalachee High School, and we are just sharing with you their accounts. I can't get out of my mind, Jonathan, the mother and son just holding on to each other. The mother didn't even say a word. She allowed her son to share what he experienced. He talked about it sounding like a locker being slammed, and they thought initially that it might be somebody just fooling around in the hallway until the sound continued, and then they heard about the hard lockdown, and that is what drove all of the students to the back of the classroom, as you mentioned, to turn off the lights until they were able to leave. And we've said that this is something that students practice for nowadays, but practicing for something like this and it actually unfolding in your actual life is a completely different situation.
Very different. Perhaps we can even get our producers to get that soundbite recued to run a little bit, because I think it was so emotional, and I think gripping to really see that mom and her son right next to each other, really giving a firsthand account of what he saw, and then you saw her emotion just in her face. Just listening and seeing the visual and the audio from that was just probably the most emotional thing I've seen so far in our coverage. So we'll see if our producers can get that back up. But again, a lot of answers we just don't have at this hour. This all started to unfold around 9:30 this morning, but here we are going into the 3 o'clock hour and still waiting for some specific answers as to exactly how many people were truly affected by this. We know, according to the GBI, 4 dead, 9 hospitalized, but perhaps more people have been affected by this in terms of physically, in terms of injuries. But we know this community is just shaken. It is rocked by this. And tonight, as you mentioned, there will be a community vigil happening, I believe, around 7 o'clock.
Yeah, 7 o'clock, Jug Tavern Park. 7 p.m. That is 113 East Athens Street in Winder, Georgia. That is where that community vigil will be taking place tonight for anyone who wants to attend and show their love and support following this shooting. Jonathan, I'm hearing from our producers that we do have that sound once again. Take a listen and take a look, if you can, just to feel what this family, this mother and son, were experiencing following today's shooting.
It was just like a loud boom, as if a locker had slammed. So my teacher thought it was just like some kid acting foolish. So then she took a peek outside, and then we heard repeatedly the banging again, and that's when we could identify it was a gun. And then the hard lockdown was placed, and then we ran to the back of the classroom, turned off the lights. I was shaking scared, and I didn't have my phone on me, and I couldn't communicate with my mom for half an hour. And I didn't know what was going to happen because you could hear the gunfires right down the hall. So I don't know if it was like the last chance I had to talk with her. But luckily, I'm here.
Luckily, he is here. And you could hear as he was recounting those moments, the mom, you could just see it in her face, kind of reliving probably what she had felt just moments ago before she knew that her son was there and he was okay. And that is the story, that is the scene of so many parents who are showing up today. Some of them still showing up to the school, picking up their children. I would assume that many of them by now have shown up already. But for many who are not as fortunate as that mother to be able to hug their kids tonight, those are the people we've got to think about. A lot of people, a lot of family members affected by what happened.
Certainly, and we've been hearing from our reporters there on the ground, speaking with students, speaking with family members, trying to get a hold of their students. Some parents telling us they walked for more than 2 miles to get to the school because there is, as you see right here from earlier, such a heavy police and law enforcement presence there on the ground at Apalachee High School. Parents just parking anywhere they could and saying, I'm going to walk on foot. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to my child on this school's campus following these reports of this shooting, something that parents never want to hear about. They never want to get that message. And unfortunately, we heard from several students today who said either it took them a long time to get to their phone or they did not have access to their phone. And that can only imagine just added to the agony for those students and for their parents looking for information, looking for confirmation from their student that they were okay.
Yeah, just to be in that situation and feel sort of helpless, not having that communication just makes it, I'm sure, so much more heartbreaking and really just scary, to say the least. We do know that we are expecting another update, as we keep telling you, from the sheriff, so please stay with us here this afternoon because that could come within the next hour. We have already heard through statements from Governor Brian Kemp, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, and U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, who spoke earlier, along with Karine Jean-Pierre from the White House, the press secretary. The president also issuing a statement shortly thereafter, really reiterating what she said earlier. And I think the thing that stood out to me in the president's statement, saying we cannot continue to accept this as normal because we cover these. And this time it happened here in Georgia, in our community, but it happens far too often elsewhere as well.
Far too frequently. The press secretary saying this is not normal. And unfortunately, we know that this situation may take political undertones at some point, but I think we can all agree that this is not anything that anyone wants to see in their community or in any community.
All right. Right now, we want to go to one of our reporters, our Zach Merchant. I believe Zach is live right now at Northeast Medical Center, Northeast Georgia Medical Center. Zach, we know that the victims have been taken to a number of hospitals. What is happening where you are?
Right, Jonathan, if you take a look right behind me, we're in front of Northeast Georgia Medical Center's Barrow location. This is where a Northeast Georgia Health System spokesperson confirms that one gunshot victim from today's school shooting was transported. Another gunshot victim, he says, was transported to Northeast Georgia Medical Center's Gainesville location. That spokesperson tells us that that Gainesville location is a level 1 trauma center. For those of you who might not know, I know you've unfortunately today been hearing that phrase a lot. Level 1 trauma centers are the highest prepared, most ready to handle serious trauma, injuries, and incidents hospitals across the state. This spokesperson we talked to today had no more information than that. He couldn't provide the names, the ages, the male or female, the gender, the sex of those who are injured, or importantly, their condition. But we do know that, again, 2 people are being transported and are actually being treated right now at Northeast Georgia Health System hospitals. Importantly, as we talk about this community here in Barrow, it's a small community. A lot of people know folks who were involved, who were affected by what happened today. We told you we're right in front of the Northeast Georgia Medical Center. Well, the parking lot we are in, we spoke with 2 18-year-old men. They say they both just graduated from Barrow High School just in the spring. They say, as you'd expect, they say they are afraid that some people who they may know may have been affected by the shooting at Apalachee High School today. They say they're watching closely to see as we learn names and identities of those who were injured, those who were hurt, and those who were tragically killed. They're watching closely, afraid that some of those names they'll recognize. They say they went to Winder Barrow, but they've been to Apalachee many times for high school football games and other events. Talk about how close this community is, how many connections there are. One of the men we spoke to, his name is Christian Kinna. He says earlier today his younger sister, who is still a high school student at Winder Barrow, he says she was placed on lockdown at Winder Barrow. We want to be really clear. There was no active threat at Winder Barrow, authorities confirmed to us, but Winder Police, along with a slew of other law enforcement agencies who've been in the region here, placed Winder Barrow High School on a hard lockdown out of a abundance of caution and to make sure that all school locations in the county were secured. This gentleman we talked to today, Christian Kinna, he says his sister was there during lockdown, a frightening experience. He says thankfully she is okay, but he is worried, he's fearful, he's heartbroken, he says, as he worries and is paying attention to see who all may have been affected at Apalachee High School. We have an interview with those two gentlemen, those two recent Winder Barrow High School students. We're going to work to get that back to the station and bring that to you in just a little bit. For now, we are live outside Northeast Georgia Medical Center in Barrow.
All right, our Zach Merchant live for us. Thanks so much. And Zach, again, telling us that we know at least a gunshot wound victim taken where he is in the Barrow, another in Gainesville. We do know, again, another gunshot wound victim we've learned is at Grady Hospital, another level 1 trauma center, and then CNN reporting a victim in the Athens area at Piedmont Athens Regional. So again, these victims taken to a number of hospitals across North Georgia.
All right, we want to get you back live now to the scene at Apalachee High School. That is where our Molly Oak is. So Molly, have you had a chance to speak with any other students or family members out there on campus?
Well, guys, we just want to talk about just how heavy it is right now. We're not seeing as many parents and students come through. For a while there, we just saw dozens coming out of the school, parents finally getting to reunite with their kids, loved ones getting to find either their kids or their friends' kids. I want you to hear from one student I just spoke with. He told me that he thought he was going to die when he heard the gunshots.
I heard gunshots, and then my teacher told us to get in the corner, and then they were clearing this. I heard like screaming and police officers like, get down, put your hands on your head. It was crazy. And then when they were clearing their building, like the rooms, because you know sometimes the shooters hide amongst the kids, they were clearing our room and they busted the door. They had an AK at us, like telling us to put your hands in the air. It was really crazy. You just never know what's gonna happen.
What was going through your head when all that happened?
I thought I was going to die, and I was going to go to the bathroom right before it happened, and I'm so glad I didn't, because I would probably be dead right now if I did.
You know, we've talked with other students who heard the gunshots as well. One told me that she didn't feel like it was real until officers kept telling them, unlock the door, we need to get you out. And she said when those officers got in, they told them to run outside. She said that's when it hit her, that something was seriously wrong at the school. Now I want to step aside so you can see what that school looks like now. Still a very heavy police presence, and not just from here in the local county, but the GBI telling us is not only local but also state and federal. We have seen GBI, we have seen FBI as well, and we have seen sheriffs and police from counties all across Georgia. Now, we have a ton of law enforcement, but even more parents and loved ones waiting to reunite with their students. We can see them coming out of the school still. Now, for some perspective on that, a lot of the students were taken out to the football field. One neighbor told me she was helping out her friend trying to get to their child faster, and said that child was in the classroom across from where one of the classrooms a shooting happened. She said that child was actually kept on the football field by the GBI for a couple of hours as they were waiting to get questioned as the investigation continues. So that's why even hours after all this has happened, we're still seeing students kind of slowly but surely coming out here. Again, this is still a very active scene at the high school as we are watching some of these parents finally reunite with their loved ones after a very, very heavy day here in the county. Guys.
Our Molly Oak live for us as she continues to speak with students out there. Just heartbreaking hearing from some of those students. That one young man saying, I thought I was going to die. And I think, you know, that's what you hear when you hear gunshots. You wonder how serious this is. You wonder if that person is going to come to your classroom. It is very real. It is very raw. And just glad that some of these students are able to tell that story. I know they certainly are.
Especially to hear that young man say that he was about to go to the restroom and that he is so glad that he did not. That is not a situation or a thought that any parent or any loved one wants to imagine their child having to have thought that through.
Because you wonder, would you have been in the line of fire?
Yeah.
Because when you think about this many victims, 4 dead, 9 hospitalized, perhaps even more injured, you wonder, if I had been in the line of fire, would I be among that number? And that is what some of these students are thinking. One of those students also told Molly that they didn't think this was real. They thought, hey, this may just be a drill, until they heard law enforcement banging on the door saying, get out, run for your life. And that's what so many students did.
And that is something that these students, I've been saying, will live with for the rest of their lives. This is going to be something that they have to work through. But fortunately, we have already seen so many things coming together with the community, so many different law enforcement and first responder partners coming forward to help with this situation. We've seen neighbors rushing to the school in the stead of family members who couldn't get there to check on children for their neighbors. We also know that for those of you who are hoping for an opportunity to show your love and support, we know that there will be a Winder Community Vigil that is taking place tonight at Jug Tavern Park at 7 p.m. That's at 113 East Athens Street in Winder. So I'm going to say that information for you once again in case you want to grab a pen and write this down. There is a Winder Community Vigil taking place, and this is going to be at Jug Tavern Park at 7 p.m. This is at 113 East Athens Street in Winder, and that is where that community vigil will take place tonight at 7 p.m. so people can go out there and offer their support to the community and also pay respects to those who have unfortunately have lost their lives in this situation. The GBI confirming 4 people are dead tonight.
And I'd assume that that vigil will be packed with people in this community. This is a, you know, not a tiny community, but it's a relatively small community where you would assume that people know someone at that high school. They have a loved one, they have a friend, someone that they know affiliated with this high school. And so this is, it just affected so many people. So again, that vigil happening tonight. And we are coming up right on the 3 o'clock hour, where we expect within the next hour to hear from the sheriff in Winder to get another update. During his last update a short time ago, he did confirm that there were injuries, there were fatalities, but did not give any specific numbers. Also saying that the suspect is in custody, but not saying much about who that suspect is or any perhaps potential motive behind this today.
All right, our Caitlin Ross is joining us now out here. And Caitlin, you say you spoke with a parent about what their experience was as they were learning more and more about the shooting.
And waiting to get all of the information they could. That's what's so scary about this. These first calls came in. Parents are rushing to the school trying to get any information we can. This one father I spoke to says he was at the school by 10:30, rushed in, was able to get his daughter immediately, but says from then on it was panic. It was chaos. People were trying to get accurate information. That's what we have been doing all afternoon, is making sure that all of the information that we're bringing to you is accurate, that we have it sourced, that we have it confirmed. Because he says there were so many rumors flying, it was hard to keep track of where it happened, who it happened to, when it happened. He says all of the parents and students were corralled out onto the football field. He says it was hot, people were sobbing, kids couldn't get water or food. He says their backpacks, their phones, their car keys were all still inside the school, so they couldn't leave, they couldn't call their parents. He says that he was going around trying to get kids in touch with their parents so they knew where to reunite with everyone. But he says it was a really difficult situation, and I just got off the phone with him 5 minutes. He's still on that football field. Take a listen.
It was very unorganized, and the reason being is they weren't ready for this. Nobody's seen this coming. I mean, you don't really know what to do, so they kind of just have them all thrown in the field out here so they can make sure everybody's safe, I think.
And what he said there that really struck a chord with me was you didn't see this coming. You hear about this, but you cannot prepare for this type of horror. And he says that is what the kids and the parents are trying to wrap their minds around right now, that this happened in their community. And Jonathan, I think you made such an important point earlier when you said this is a small community, it's a tight-knit community. And as I was starting to hear from parents and educators and families there, they all know someone in that community. They are all connected to each other. And so that's why we're being so careful to make sure that the information that we're sharing is confirmed, because these rumors are flying. If you've been on social media at all today, you've seen 5 different stories of what could have happened. And so he really wanted to emphasize that he's grateful for the accurate information that's coming out, because the kids are getting really scared as they keep hearing these rumors that turn out not to be true. But in a situation like this, it's so difficult to keep track of everything.
It's something you pointed out that I think is interesting. We're seeing some of these aerial shots of all the students, but hearing that perspective of what's going on directly on the ground, not having communication, being tired, frustrated, not getting the answers, you can imagine for those students and parents how hard that is.
Yeah, he says this is really going to be a hard reset moment where the school and schools across Georgia, across the country, are going to have to come up with a really firm plan, because he says that's where a lot of the frustration comes from, is that he didn't feel like they had a plan. He didn't feel like they knew exactly where to go or how to contact their parents or how to share information about what was happening. So he says, look, the school is trying their best. They're doing everything they can, but it's just really slow moving. And when it's that hot, they don't have water, they don't have access to their phones. It's really frustrating. When I was on the phone with him, I could hear police in the background, and they were really specifically telling people where to go, by which hallway, which teacher, when they were going to be dismissed. I do think this is important to highlight. He said police are taking this extremely seriously in terms of safety with dismissal. No child is being allowed off that football field without a parent and an ID of that parent. So they're checking the IDs of every guardian or parent who comes to pick up their kids against class lists. They have the gates locked, and until you've shown an ID and you can prove who you are, police are not allowing those students to leave with anyone. So they are really locking down the safety there.
And Caitlin, as you're talking about that process for the reunification, we now have a live image again of what is taking place out there on that Apalachee High School football field. So we see small groups of people walking around that track.
I want to interrupt because we have Vice President Kamala Harris live, I believe, talking.
And their families, of course. And we are grateful to the first responders and the law enforcement that were on the scene. But this is just a senseless tragedy on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive. It's senseless. It is. We've got to stop it. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all. You know, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. So we will continue, of course, to send our prayers and our thoughts to the families and all those who were affected, including, you know, I'm going off script right now, but listen, I mean, you know, at the last year, I started a college tour, and I traveled our country meeting with our young leaders, right? And so it was college-age young leaders. So I did trade schools, colleges, universities, community colleges. By the way, I love Gen Z. I just love Gen Z. Right? But I'll tell you, one of the things that I asked every time I went to the auditorium, and it would be filled with these young leaders, students, and I'd ask them, raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade you had to endure an active shooter drill. And for the young leaders who are here who are raising their hand, I'm telling you, every time the auditorium was packed and almost every hand went up. You know, a lot of us, I'll speak about myself, you know, we had, well, I grew up in California, earthquake drills, we had fire drills, but our kids are sitting in a classroom where they should be fulfilling their God-given potential, and some part of their big, beautiful brain is concerned about a shooter busting through the door of the classroom. It does not have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. And, you know, this is one of the many issues that's at stake in this election. So New Hampshire, look, we have 62 days to go. 62 days to go. And I'm going to tell you what you already know. This race is going to be tight until the very end. So please, let's not pay too much attention to the polls, because we are running as the underdog. We know what they're capable of.
All right, you were just listening there live to Vice President Kamala Harris during a rally in New Hampshire, addressing what unfolded today, calling it an outrageous tragedy and emphasizing, she said, it doesn't have to be this way.
All right, we want to get back to Caitlin Ross, who is with us, because Caitlin, you were describing what parents will have to do in order to be reunified with their students out of Apalachee High School. And right now, we're taking a live look at the high school, at that football field where we know students were placed and taken following this shooting.
They said they wanted to make sure that security was as tight as it possibly could be. They had the students broken up into hallways that they were in when that shooting happened, and that's how they were trying to start organizing that dismissal. They needed to have a parent and an ID before they were allowed outside of those gates. So the gates were locked and police officers were checking every single ID of every single parent before a student was allowed to go. The frustration that this dad was telling me, though, was that a lot of the students couldn't get in touch with their parents because they fled the school so quickly. Their cell phones were still in their backpacks. If they had a car there, their car keys were still in their lockers. So they weren't able to leave even though they were safely evacuated outside the building. He said he was always also really frustrated that it didn't seem like the school had a plan to keep these kids safe once they were outside on the field, that they didn't have water, they didn't have food. He told me he saw people passing out from the heat. So he says they were evacuated safely, but then after they were on that football field, it didn't seem like there was a plan to care for those kids then. He says he understands that they didn't have a plan because you can't plan for something like this. It's so horrible. It is so unimaginable that when it does happen, the people on the ground are doing the best they can, but what you heard him say was that was not enough, that this was chaotic, that kids were sobbing, they were passing out, and they weren't able to reach their guardians. So he had a lot of frustration there about what was happening and how the school was handling the dismissal. But police officers on the scene, educators, administration from the school, they were very focused on safety, and he made sure to get that point home to us. You can see the kids now still on the track, and he says they have been there since 10:45 this morning. So you see them kind of lined up like that. That's exactly what he was describing, that they were trying to line kids up and organize them and figure out how to safely get them together with their parents to get out of the school. But imagine this, I mean, these first shots happened at 9:30 in the morning. It is now 3:14, and those kids are still alone without their parents on a school football field.
Yeah, it's still a fraction of what we saw earlier. I believe some 1,900 students attend that high school, but still, as you said, we're looking at hours later and students still there, still waiting for their guardian, still waiting for answers even as to when things will change.
And you never know what a different family's situation in particular is. If a parent can get off work to rush out there. We've heard stories of neighbors going out to try and see about their other neighbors' children because a parent couldn't get out there or couldn't get there as quickly. And so it's very hard to address a situation like this if a parent normally expects their child to drive themselves home or go home with a friend, and now that's interrupted. And this is just specifically talking about this reunification and getting kids back home.
Yeah, there was so much organization that was going into this as they were trying to reunify kids with parents, and just hearing you say, gosh, like, if you couldn't reach your kid, if you couldn't get there, that's unimaginable.
It is.
But unfortunately, these schools are put in the position where they do have to plan for this. They have to be ready for it. I spoke with an ER doctor who was telling me about everything they do to get ready for these situations and how they are all training so specifically for not the if, but the when this happens. He's a trauma doctor, and he was saying that even at the smallest hospitals out here where they might not be surrounded by a big metro area, he says they're training constantly for active shooter drills. And the toll that that takes on the hospital staff and the EMS and the firefighters who are responding out to these scenes is incredible, because they know that eventually they'll be put in this position. So, you know, I just asked him, what are you going to be doing if you're in that hospital this afternoon? And he says they are scrambling into position, that they train for this, and every resource at every hospital where these victims are being sent is optimizing for their care right now to do everything they can to help them heal.
That's right, because we know from the GBI that people are being taken to various hospital facilities, some in Atlanta, some in Gainesville, some in Barrow. They're just being taken to various hospitals, and even if your hospital isn't here in that particular immediate vicinity, you're certainly being pressed into action to respond appropriately to what is going on here in this Barrow County community.
And one of the things that we talked about today is that, you know, you prepare for things like this, right? You go through drills, but it never is the same until you really have to go through this and live this. And we saw, even just from the numbers that we have on the screen, 4 dead, 9 hospitalized. When police got there to the scene, they were dealing with an active shooter situation with a lot of victims, you know, so that's all. So of course parents want, you know, to be reunified. Of course parents want their kids to be safe, but this was very much an active scene when they arrived, trying to get to the bottom of just how many victims there were. That was the first thing. And was everyone safe? Were there multiple shooters? So there were a lot of early questions that I think were priority and perhaps led to maybe a delay in helping some of those students who were on the football field.
Right, exactly. I wonder if we could bring up the sound from the trauma doctor, because I thought that was so interesting when he was talking about the impact that this has on hospitals, on caregivers, when they are put into this position where, Jonathan, you said there is such an incredible amount of people who are pressing into these hospitals at once. So his name is Dr. Murshad Edashami, and he is the medical director at a local hospital.
I can tell you, as a medical director, it is incredibly nerve-wracking in that we have to make sure that our staff is ready, that they're prepared, that we have the resources, that our X-ray machines and CAT scan machines are all working, that we have the appropriate number of nurses and physicians, and and mentally, psychologically, it does take a toll on staff as well.
Yeah, it's going to take a toll on this whole community for a really long time. Another point that he made there was it's important for all of us to remember that this is not an isolated incident today. This is something that we are going to be dealing with as a state and as a country for a really long time.
Yeah. Caitlin, thank you so much for all of your reporting today. Thank you. We do want to get to a statement that was just released within the last hour or so from Governor Brian Kemp. He said, "Marty, the girls and I are heartbroken by today's tragedy at Apalachee High School. This is a day every parent dreads, and Georgians everywhere will hug their children tighter this evening because of this painful event. We continue to work closely with local, state, and federal partners to make any and all resources available to help this community on this incredibly difficult day and in the days to come." That statement posted on X by Georgia Governor Brian Kemp.
That's right, and we have been hearing from a number of officials all the way up from the White House, President Biden. We just heard live on air from Vice President Kamala Harris. Jennifer, you read that statement from the governor, even down to Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, emphasizing the support that the city of Atlanta is providing, not only to some of the schools there in Winder by sending resources, but also bolstering security at some of the Atlanta public schools in light of what happened today. So we have heard and seen a lot of response today as this is all unfolded.
And I want to mention, when we were hearing from Caitlin earlier, she was talking about hearing from that parent and how so many students and family and staff members out there on the ground were hearing so many different things, so much misinformation. So I do want to clarify some things that we do know tonight from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They are reporting again that 4 people are dead and an additional 9 people have been taken to various hospitals with injuries. This is one of the pieces of information that we do want to clarify here. The GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, saying the suspect is in custody and is alive. Any reports that the suspect has been neutralized are inaccurate. So that suspect is alive and in custody. We're also hearing reports of additional shootings. The GBI says that is false. Any reports of any additional shootings at nearby schools are false. So that is the verified information from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The suspect is in custody and alive, and there have been no additional nearby shootings as a result of what we have seen unfold at Apalachee High School.
Good to have that information confirmed. All afternoon, really within the last couple hours, we have been hearing from students who were inside the school, some telling us they were in the 10th grade hallway when they heard the gunfire erupt, some of them telling us they had to run into the corner, turn off the lights, others saying that they heard law enforcement banging on the classroom door, telling them to go and run.
All right, so we want to bring in our Cody Alcorn now. And Cody, you have been speaking with some folks out there who have connections to people and students out there on the ground.
That's right. I mean, this morning started out as a typical morning at this high school, one of several in that community. I actually was woken up out of my sleep by my partner who said, hey, do you know our friend Sarita? Her son goes to that school. We need to get in touch with her. I just got off the phone with her. Her son was in the K Hall, so that's what this hall is known as at Apalachee High School. It's 9th and 10th graders in this hall. She says what they found out, what her son's telling her, is that they were in the classroom, all of a sudden heard multiple shots being fired. At that point, they started hearing screams from the classrooms. He was 2 classrooms down from where those shots were being fired. They say they huddled in that classroom, obviously scared. This is not, unfortunately, new to these kids. They've seen this. They've seen it on the news. They've watched documentaries about this. They understood what was about to happen. She said obviously he is in shock. Once they got the clear, the cops came and got them out of their classroom, and that's when he saw what no 9th grader should ever see. He's a 9th grader there. As they were walking, they saw those bodies in the hallway. They looked into a classroom. They could see blood in one of those classrooms, and as you can imagine, Sarita said, he's still in shock at this point. He's been crying off and on. And I asked her, I said, well, how did you find out? That's so many parents are going through that in this community. She was actually at work. A colleague of hers got a text and said, hey, there's been a shooting from her kid, and just want to tell you I love you. Obviously, these kids did not know if they were going to be shot, what was going to happen inside the school. Sarita said immediately they just jumped in the car and started driving to Apalachee High School. She said they were, in fact, one of the first 50 people getting to that school. She said on the way there, they did get in touch, at least with her son. He was hysterical, but said, Mom, I'm okay, but this is what's happened. There's been a shooting. And she said it took about an hour to get to him. Obviously, every parent wanted to get to their kid and just put their hands on their child. But she said it was about 3 more hours until they could get out of that football field. She was there among these parents and students. And I think now it's the shock, and I think it's setting in that this happened in our community. I was telling Newsroom a while ago, I was just up there talking to Sheriff Judge Smith. He graduated from the nearby high school at 8 miles from there. He's from that community. And I think the context of this is the fact that when they got that word, shots being fired inside Apalachee High School, many of those men and women responding there either had children there, they know a family member there, they had no students that are there. And the whole time driving there, they knew what was about to happen. And I think, those 911 dispatchers, I think we forget about them. That's what, I was hearing parents, students calling in and saying, hey, what's going on? Those dispatchers trying to get all of these officers there. But I think it's just, now it's setting in, like, this has happened in our community. And I think that's the reality setting in. I don't think you ever think it's going to happen to you.
Yeah, and you mentioned the heartbreaking reality that these students had to see some of this. It's difficult enough to know that someone someone that you love, someone that you see every day at school has lost their lives or has been injured, but then to see the results of that with your own eyes in class, that is something, I keep saying the mental toll this is going to take on so many of these students, that is something they will never be able to forget.
Yeah, I just watched a documentary. I mean, it's ironic, just literally this past weekend, of a past school shooting down in Florida. We all know that one very well, and that's what those students who were interviewed said they'll never get out of their minds. They wish they hadn't seen those bodies. They wish they hadn't seen the blood, because that's what they'll never get out of their minds. And I think that's what Sarita, I think parents are now concerned, what did they hear, what did they see, and I think now it's just, starting that dialogue and trying to process that, because I don't think, as a 9th grader, that's not what you ever want your 9th grader to see or experience. And I think for those kids, again, they heard that first shot and they already knew. And I think it's just a terrifying, once it stopped. And I think that's what, as the details come out, did they engage with the shooter, how they got the shots stopped? As you mentioned, there was some false reporting that the shooter was neutralized, but the person is in custody, and I think that's what everyone wants to know why. But I think it's a complex investigation. Obviously, they're probably at the suspect's home trying to figure out how long this had been planned. Were there any more people involved? Was this a bigger type of event? But, I just, talking to Sarita on the phone, I think it kind of sets in, it gives you context. This town is what, I think 20,000 people. This school has 2,000 students. Obviously, every student at that school or parent knows that student or that teacher or that coach, whoever might have been these victims, they're not walking out. Everybody walked into school today thinking, hey, it's a regular Wednesday. And unfortunately, some of those people are not walking out of that school.
Yeah. Did Sarita say if that student had been interviewed by the GBI or anyone on scene or had any questions?
I haven't got that far. Again, she could not reach me. We've been trying to get back and forth, but cell service, that's another thing. A lot of people could not get through up there. You had 2,000 students plus their parents plus family members trying to text and call. That was tying up the lines. And you had all of these emergency responders texting, calling. And so a lot of people couldn't get a hold of their loved ones. So I do not know that, but typically in these situations, that is part of the process before they're released. But, I didn't get a long conversation with her. I just wanted to kind of get some details before I jumped on the air here. But, it seems as if they haven't been interviewed, they will have a process of doing that. But I think right now it's just trying to, again, the investigation still in its early stages, figure out how did this happen, why did it happen, making sure there are no other threats out there.
Yeah, but you think about even just from learning what happened, and then you said, what about a 3-hour time frame to actually getting that reunited, that moment? I mean, just imagine that as a parent, as a student, as anyone.
And, I think it's really quick for us to sit here on these chairs or parents sit at home and question how these events went. I know there's some questions about they were on that football field for 3 hours. It seemed chaotic. But again, this just happened at 9:30 this morning. These deputies, all these agencies were just on routine patrol when these shots came in. They practiced for this. But I covered the Townville shooting up in Anderson, South Carolina, Townville. I covered a middle school shooting in Greenville, South Carolina. And again, they train for this, but until it happens, you cannot put that into reality. And they're just trying to get these kids out to that football field. They're just trying to get these kids safe, and then make sure the suspect's in custody, make sure the suspect is no longer a threat. And I think that's where I think we all have to kind of step back and realize they did a great job obviously responding, but that'll all be coming out in the days after. But right now I think the biggest concern is those students who heard the shots, those families impacted forever, and of course the school, that this will now be their history. They will always be known as, that school shooting at Apalachee High School.
Yeah, and we've been hearing from our other reporters out there on the ground, Cody, and many of them have spoken with students or parents and loved ones out there who have a student in their life who heard those gunshots and described being in a nearby classroom on that 10th grade hall, hearing those gunshots. And I can't help but think that is something that these students will live with forever.
And I think, we always talk about that, the connection with these students after something like this. Right now, everything is so decisive across this country. I think this is the time when this community needs to know we're all wrapping our arms around them. I think at this point, all of that needs to stop. I think this tragedy, again, for context, this town's 20,000 people. This is a small community. Everybody knows everybody, and this will forever change the history of this town, this school, and this district. And again, I think you've got to realize and think about, again, the first responders. I mentioned the 911 dispatchers. Could you imagine sitting there this morning, those 911 dispatchers, obviously moms themselves, they know someone at that school, they know a student, getting those calls, help us, help us. There's a shooter. I'm sure those calls will be released in the coming weeks. We'll hear those, and all they can do is send every possible resource to try to get that person to stop. And then, everybody hangs up with them, and they kind of have to watch us. They have to listen in on what happens next. And I think that's, when we all sit back and talk about it, I think you have to, take all of that into context and perspective, because it's more than just those folks at that Apalachee High School. It's that entire community.
And you speaking about the community, I do want to remind everyone, we've been telling you a couple times here that there is a Winder Community Vigil that is scheduled for 7 p.m. tonight. We know that when something like this happens, so many people are looking for what they can do to help anyone, to show their support. So there is a community vigil taking place at Jug Tavern Park at 7 p.m. That's at 113 East Athens Street in Winder, Georgia. 113 East Athens Street, and Winder, Georgia, Jug Tavern Park at 7 p.m. And Jonathan, we were saying we're sure that this will be very well attended with a lot of people who just want to wrap their arms around this community.
And one thing, I think the big question a lot of people are asking, I'm sure you guys have asked too, about the suspect.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are looking at us like, who is this person? There's obviously reports out there, but the thing is, within just a few hours after this, they were already likely at the suspect's home. They have them identified, but there's a lot of things they have to kind of confirm before we put it out there, because once you put that out there, there's no taking that back.
Yes.
And it's not, I think there's a lot of things they have to look into, the suspect's family. They didn't ask for this. So I think there's a lot of things, they want to make sure before they come out and identify this person, they have all those facts out there before we put it out into the public, and you can never retract that.
That's exactly what we heard from the sheriff. He's saying, look, I know the media wants details, I know the community wants all these details, but he's saying that we're just not ready to release that yet. We do expect to hear from the sheriff in that area around 4 o'clock this afternoon. He told us he would try to give us an update then, so if we do get that update, we'll bring that to you both here and online as well.
And that's in just about a half an hour or so. We'll bring that to you on air, online, and in our 11 Alive News app, because we know so many people are waiting for those updates. We know there's so many questions right now about what exactly happened, how it happened, why it happened, and that is something that we will likely have to wait some days, weeks, and months in some cases to learn that information. But of course, we'll continue to work on this and bring it to you as soon as we get it. Right now, what we can tell you is that the GBI has confirmed that 4 people have been killed, 9 people hospitalized in various hospitals across our region. We know at least 1 person with a gunshot wound was taken to Grady Hospital, and we also know that 1 person each taken to Northeast Health System's Barrow and Gainesville facilities. So we know that that is at least some of the locations where some of these victims have been taken. We are working to gather more information on where other victims have been taken and what their conditions are right now. We're also working to learn more about who the people were who lost their lives, as well as this suspect. But again, that is information that we are waiting to be confirmed from the GBI, from the Barrow County Sheriff's Office, and we'll of course keep you updated as we learn more, hopefully within the next half hour or so from that sheriff's news conference.
And you mentioned, who the suspect is. The big question too is, if some of the reports are out there that this suspect is a teenager, a juvenile, then the question is, how do they get the weapon? Where did the weapon come from? Yeah. Who knew about this? And I think there's a lot of those questions. Social media, there's a lot of things out there before you post anything or you report it. You got to make sure it's accurate, because a lot of times we see a lot of false things being put out there in these cases. But I think that's another big question, because there have been some sources out there saying this is a teenager, a juvenile. We don't know if that student or that juvenile went to this school. And again, if that is in fact true, how did this kid get the gun? Yeah. And we can ask why, but I mean, it goes to show you it can happen anywhere. And at this point, it's not always important at this moment, but I think there are a lot of questions that have to be answered for that community, for those parents too, and especially for the victims who, as you know, they're going to want answers to, they sent their kids to school this morning.
And their loved ones.
They're supposed to be safe.
We also know that educators are out there, staff members, support staff are also a piece of this, a very big piece of this. And again, we are working to learn more about who exactly was involved in this situation, especially when it comes to those who lost their lives on a normal day.
And I did ask Rita about that. There's all reports out there. We've seen sourcing, and she even told me that her son said it's not just students. There are faculty members. Not sure exactly their role at the school, but it's not just students who were shot. There are faculty members among the victims inside that school. And again, I think it's hard to wrap your head around, especially it's the small communities that will forever be impacted. And again, also those first responders, you see all this response here. You saw Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office, Gwinnett County Police, state troopers. I mean, basically anybody that was within driving distance, they heard that call go out, because a lot of times dispatch does not have to dispatch those individuals. They hear that call. No one has to tell them to go. Those agencies went there. And again, every single one, hundreds of them knew driving there. They weren't sure if they were going to be the first ones, but they knew when they pulled up to that school what they were about to have to do. Mm-hmm. And that's the other heroes here, because it could have went 2 ways for those first responders. Unfortunately, none of them were hurt. Mm-hmm. And that'll be the story too. How did they get the suspect? Well, it's not always important. I think it does show you they went there, they engaged, they likely saved lives. Yeah. And again, sometimes it's easy to sit back here and question the response, but I don't think you could have seen it, because if you look at social media, I mean, from everywhere, Jackson County, Hall County, people are like, where are these, is there a chase? And it was first responders coming from different communities for one goal. Stop that shooter and save those kids' lives and faculty members inside that school.
Cody Alcorn for us tonight.
Great perspective for us, Cody. Thank you. Right now, we want to get back out live to our Molly Oak, who has been there outside the high school all afternoon. So, Molly, I know you've been speaking with students and parents. What's the latest for us?
Yeah, we have been talking with students over the past couple of hours as they've slowly but surely started to get released back into their loved ones' arms. I want to get straight to the sound that we heard from Camille. Here's what she heard inside the school.
Well, first, how you doing?
I'm good. A little traumatizing. It's not really something someone should ever have to go through. It's not something I ever want to go through. Yeah, it's traumatizing. A lot of people were crying.
Were you one of them?
Yeah, I was one of them. I was crying. I didn't want to die that way.
You heard her say, I didn't want to die that way. I also talked with a student who was in 10th grade who said, I thought I was going to die. I was about to walk out of my classroom just moments before to go to the bathroom. It's that scary thought that's starting to set in with students now, hours later. One girl said she heard the gunshots, but it didn't even hit her that something was happening until law enforcement came in and told them to run outside. That's the feeling here. Now, I want to step aside because we are right across from the school so you can get a look at what it's feeling like and what it looks like out here. Still a really heavy law enforcement presence. Now, we are getting some news from CNN. They are reporting that Apalachee High School did receive a phone call this morning that warned about shootings. CNN is saying officials are telling them that. They're saying that this high school, Apalachee High School, got an earlier phone threat. That's according to multiple law enforcement officials, all coming from CNN. Now, again, we've been talking with students who heard those gunshots. We've been talking with loved ones who are waiting to hear from their students. I heard Cody mention this earlier, but something to keep in mind out here, not only with the mass amount of law enforcement and parents and loved ones and students, is that these parents and loved ones are trying to get connected back to their students. Signal out here is rough. Texts are not going through. Phone calls are barely going through. So that's just adding to an already heightened stress environment when you're talking about something so harrowing, so awful happening going on. You, one, can't get to your student, you can't get to your child, you can't get to your grandchild, you can't get to your friend's child just to see if they're okay, and you're not even being able to hear from them either because those texts and phone calls aren't going through. Some of the students also telling me that they didn't have their phones on them at the school, or when law enforcement came in, they had to leave their phones behind or weren't able to grab their phones. So they're telling their parents there's a shooter, but then they're not able to text them again because they left their phone in the classroom when they had to get out. Now, once students were moved out of the school, they were moved to the football field. Parents were telling me that. I talked with a neighbor who came out to check on her friend's child. You talk about the community feel out here. That neighbor heard from her friend. The friend was saying, there's a shooting at my kid's school. I'm an hour away. How quickly can you get there? That neighbor dropped everything she was doing to get to that student. She was not able to pick that student up, but she was able to go up to him, check on him, give him a hug, make sure he was okay. She was telling me that he was actually with the principal when the shots first started firing, and she said that the principal told him to run and not look back. Can you imagine hearing that as a child? Because just hearing it as a reporter talking to these folks has been incredibly emotional. I cannot tell you the amount of hugs I have shared with people off camera when they're walking by us. We're just asking them, is your loved one okay? Is everything good? And they're either saying, yes, thank God, or I just got to speak with them, or I just got to hug them. And it is emotional out here, guys. There's this feeling of community, of everyone just wanting to help, because it was hard to get down here. Now, the road has opened up a bit since we've been down here for hours now, but when we first got here, you had to park and walk. That one neighbor telling me that she parked and walked 2.5 miles just to try to get as close as possible to lay some hands on these kids. Because you think about it, it's one thing to get a text from your child or from your grandchild or from a loved one saying, there's a shooter, I'm okay. It's a totally different thing to physically see your child, to physically get to hug them. Now, when we talk about the kids being out on the football field, you've seen that they're still coming out from the football field. It's been taking hours. One of the folks I talked with whose loved one heard the shots, they said they were able to check in on them on the football field, but that child had to stay out there because they were going to get questioned by the GBI. So they said that could take a couple of hours. Now, it's been a couple of hours since I spoke with them, but that's maybe one of the reasons why this is taking a little bit of longer than many people would have expected, which of course always feels even longer when you're just waiting to see your kid again. So it does sound like they're at least letting parents go up and reunite with the kids if they are still getting questioned and having to wait for a bit before they can actually be released and come home. Now, some of the kids I was also talking to said they don't plan to come to school anytime soon. They're still really processing this and trying to sit with this. But again, a really heavy presence here. We're talking local, state, and federal here, all coming in on this investigation, and the entire community really just hurting today, guys.
Understandably so. Our Molly Oak live for us at the school where she's been talking with students and parents all afternoon, hearing story after story. Many of those students who heard the gunfire, some who were close by and really saw what happened, others just running for their lives, not knowing what was going on. As she mentioned, there is still a large police presence there at Apalachee High School in Winder. Also, there are still a number of students. We saw a live shot about 30 minutes ago of I'd say maybe 30 or 40 students still on the track near the football field waiting to be reconnected with their parents, as we have seen little by little that number go down as those parents have been showing up to the school for the last 5 hours.
And right now we are continuing to hear from our various local leaders. We have a statement from Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock we want to show you right now from his response. He says, "My heart breaks for the families of the victims at Apalachee High School, and every student and the entire Winder community is in my prayers. But we can't pray only with our lips. We must pray by taking action." That coming from Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. He went on to say, "Until we center the people and start a serious bipartisan conversation in Washington and state capitals across the country to advance popular common sense gun safety reforms, the sad truth is it's only a matter of time before this kind of tragedy comes knocking on your door." Again, that coming from Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock today in response to the shooting today at Apalachee High School.
We have also, Jennifer, heard today from a number, as you mentioned, a number of elected officials, including Governor Brian Kemp, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, all the way up to the White House. President Joe Biden issuing a statement along with his press secretary, speaking at the beginning of her conference, her news conference earlier today. A lot of statements, a lot of prayers, a lot of support, but a lot of people saying you've got to do more than that to prevent something like this from happening again. As you're taking a look at some video from earlier today, shortly after this all unfolded, around 9:30 this morning, when the first calls came in to police about shots being fired there at the high school, shortly thereafter, police responded and were able to engage with the shooter, the suspect, who we understand is now in police custody.
All right, we want to get now to Dr. Cedric Alexander. He's the former DeKalb County Public Safety Chief. Dr. Alexander, can you hear us?
Are you able to hear us?
Yes. All right. Dr. Alexander, thank you so much for your time in reaching out and speaking with us today on what is really a terrible day for the community in Barrow County. What kind of insight can you give us and share with us as local law enforcement there and partners around the Metro Atlanta area are working to begin this investigation?
Well, yes, this is still at the beginning of this investigation, and hopefully we'll learn more here pretty soon. When they do a press conference and give us more information around maybe as much as they're able to share around what occurred and the number of people that were injured, and sadly the number of people that lost their lives as well. You know, here we are again at another school shooting here at a public school or private school or any institution in this country, and we seem to just cannot figure out what is it that we need to do to reduce the likelihood of these types of events. So I think what you're going to hear is what took place, and hopefully they give us some timelines around some of this. But this is going to be an ongoing investigation that involves local agencies there in Barrow County and, of course, throughout the state and from our federal partners as well. So I think here shortly we may learn more. But this is a sad day for that community, for the state of Georgia, and for this entire country. And we're all upset and sickened by hearing these ongoing types of school violence where you have a shooter that do so much harm to so many people across this country and in that community as well. We all are traumatized by it, to be honest with you.
And we know a lot of times when shootings like this happen, in particular, where you have a lot of people impacted, police don't tend to release a lot of information early on. We know we're going on 5 hours until this happened or from this happening, and we still don't know a lot. Explain the process of an investigation like this and why it may be a little slower to get some of that information out.
Well, certainly what you want to do when you have this type of a horrible event that take place. And I myself, some years ago, when I was chief of police there in DeKalb County, Georgia, we had a school shooting. And even though no one was severely injured or killed, the impact was the same. So when a chief or a sheriff or someone in a leadership position has to step out to the public and be able to share as much information as they can, because number one, the public needs to know as much as we're able to share, as long as it does not compromise the integrity of the investigation itself. But certainly, we may give limited information initially because everything is so fluid. We know as much as we can. We still could have a bad guy on the scene. We still could have casualties. We just don't know. Or we could be fully engaged in a firefight. So we just have to be able to be cautious so that we don't overstate what is taking place. But as we learn more and more, it becomes very important for law enforcement to share that with the community. And communities understand that. But you're not going to get away with not saying anything at all. You have to be able to share some skeletal information, and as more information is gleaned here again, as long as it does not impact the integrity of the investigation, they are able to give the community more and more. And hopefully by 4 o'clock this afternoon, Eastern Standard Time, we'll know a little bit more than what we knew this morning.
Yeah, that is what we're looking forward to. And when we're talking about what we know so far, we know that it isn't just Barrow County Sheriff Office. We know that there are also state, other municipalities, and the federal government law enforcement arms that are also working to help in this investigation. What can you say about how these partnerships come together? Because they're not the same, but they're all working toward that same common goal. They're all responding to the same situation, sometimes at various times. How does that kind of come together?
Well, if it happens in any jurisdiction, certainly that local agency has control or command of that incident and that scene. Subsequent help that comes from the state and the federal government is very important help, and particularly from neighboring agencies as well, too. You may need more police officers in order to set up a perimeter, or you may have to join your SWAT teams together, depending on what the mission may be at that particular time. You may have to have additional EMS units available. So if there are casualties or injuries, you're able to extract them and get them the medical attention they need as quickly as possible. But all these agencies serve a very important role in supporting each other. And of course, the federal partners, whether the ATF, the FBI, whomever, play a significant role with these resources that they have available to them, that they make available to all local agencies across the country when they're involved in these type of incidents.
Dr. Alexander, we appreciate your time. I'm going to let you go, but one final question. Is there anything that you think families and members of this Barrow County community should keep in mind or remember tonight?
Well, let's all keep each other in our prayers, and certainly keep that community in our prayers. It's going to be a long recovery for that community, as it will be for the rest of us. But let's keep them all in our prayers. Let's move forward, and let's also make sure, and I would encourage them to make sure, to reach out to their elected officials, because more needs to be done around the accessibility of weapons in our communities across this country. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Cedric Alexander, thank you so much for your perspective and your time today. Thank you.
Right now, you're taking a look again at some video from earlier today over the scene there at Apalachee High School shortly after this happened. This is a look at the sheer number of students who were there earlier this morning. This was around 10:30 or so. Some 1,900 students at the high school all shifted there to the football field, waiting to be reconnected with their parents. At last check, about 30 or 45 minutes ago, we saw that it was down to just about 30 or 40 students still waiting to be reunified with their parents. We do know several schools in the area were on lockdown as a result of what happened at the high school, including an elementary and middle school in the area. We are still waiting to get an update on those schools, whether the lockdown has been fully lifted and those students have been allowed to go home.
And we also want to reiterate information coming in from the GBI because there were some reports of additional shootings taking place at neighboring schools, and the GBI says that is incorrect. That is not factual information. We understand right now that there is a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of folks not knowing what to believe, but we do know from the GBI tonight that reports of additional shootings following this one at Apalachee High School are incorrect. We also know it's incorrect that the shooter has been neutralized. We have been told by the GBI that the suspect is in custody and that person is alive. So that's some new information, or rather some confirmed information that we have from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation as people are continuing to look for any other sort of information that they can get tonight. And hopefully in about 10 minutes or so, we will get more information from the Barrow County Sheriff's Office. They told us when they spoke earlier that perhaps around 4 o'clock we might get some new details. We may have an opportunity to ask questions, and so we are standing by for that, and we will bring it to you live on air and online at 11alive.com and inside our 11 Alive News app as soon as that begins.
We are also getting some new information coming in from our Zach Merchant, who is at one of the hospitals, telling us now confirmed that Northeast Georgia Health System now treating 3 Apalachee High School shooting gunshot victims. 2 are at the Northeast Georgia Medical Center Barrow location. Again, earlier he had told us it was 1, so now 2 at that Northeast Barrow location. 1 is at the Northeast Georgia Medical Center Gainesville location. We also know, according to him and the officials there at the hospital system, that 5 patients have been self-transported to Northeast Georgia Health Systems with what they're calling anxiety or panic attack symptoms related to the shooting. So again, these are not just people who were directly physically impacted, but I guess you could say impacted by panic attacks, anxiety, and just a lot of stress and worry that's happening right now.
And these people having to take themselves or another loved one, taking them to the hospital as a result. And we've been talking this afternoon about the lasting effects, the mental effects of those who have witnessed this. We heard from our Cody Alcorn reporting, speaking with a parent, that their child saw blood and saw bodies in that school. And so these are ramifications that you may not think about right away, but we are seeing these ramifications play out as people are having to take other students who were a part of this and other people who were connected to this to receive treatment for, as you said, panic attacks and things of that nature.
And something you don't think about sometimes, that, you know, just so many impacts, as Cody said, people who are just worried, they're fearful, they have so much anxiety, not knowing maybe how their loved one is doing in the hospital and how this is going to turn out. Again, we are expecting another update around 4 o'clock. So any moment now in the next 5 or 10 minutes, perhaps, from the sheriff and other law enforcement. We have been working our sources with the FBI and with other Georgia law enforcement trying to get more information. But until we can confirm information, we will not be bringing that to you because, as you said, Jennifer, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of rumors out there, but we want to give you the very latest. And the very latest this afternoon and from the GBI is that we believe 4 people have been confirmed dead. Again, that's what they've confirmed, along with 9 in the hospital and possibly more who've been injured in some other type of way.
And we are showing you images right now that we have from our 11 Live Sky Tracker earlier in today. And you can see the sheer number of students who were evacuated from Apalachee High School, taken out to the football field there. And we understand from other visuals we've received later in the day that those numbers have dwindled down because they were allowing parents to be reunited with their students. students. We heard from our Caitlin Ross, who spoke with a parent who was one of the first out there earlier today, who was able to lay hands on his student, that they were doing a process by which they were checking IDs before students were allowed to leave campus with an adult. We've also heard from our other reporters, including Molly Oak and Doug Richards out there on the ground, that parents were parking and walking miles to try to get to the school just to see if their child was okay. So a lot of parents out there going to great lengths to check on their children and make sure they were all right after getting those initial reports from their students that something bad was going on today.
As our Cody Alcorn also joined us a short time ago, he pointed out that this could take days to get to the bottom of some of these answers. Of course, there's the initial investigation, right? What happened, when it happened. But then again, if this was a young person, if this was a student perhaps, or someone affiliated with the school, how did they get a gun? How did they get, in this situation? Those are answers we may not have for some time now. Police want to interview, of course, victims. They want to interview family members. They even want to perhaps interview parents who are involved. And so there's a lot to get to, and that is why you are still seeing a very large police presence at the school. While a lot of the students have gone home and reconnected with their families, we still have seen dozens of law enforcement there on campus.
And we have been told earlier by some family members out there on the ground that some of those students were being interviewed today, speaking with officials and investigators from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation as part of their efforts to figure out what took place here. Some of those students being kept on campus to answer questions about what they saw, what they heard before they were able to be released. So that is just one piece of this investigation that is already underway, speaking with those student witnesses and I'm sure staff members and educators on campus as well. We are expecting in the next 3 or 4 minutes, hopefully, to hear from the sheriff in Barrow County, hopefully get some questions answered and bring you that information. We will bring it to you live on air and online at 11alive.com and inside our 11 Alive News app as soon as that begins. But we are watching and standing by to see if and when that takes place.
Yes, we will be right here as we get ready for our 4 o'clock newscast. We will continue to stay on top of this breaking news for the next couple hours or so as we are learning new information really every hour or so.
Again, the GBI confirming 4 people dead, 9 hospitalized, transported to various medical facilities across the metro Atlanta region. We are working to get additional details. We have crews on the ground out at Apalachee High School. We have crews also stationed at various medical centers across metro Atlanta, and we will keep bringing you that updated information as well as from our crews here in the newsroom who are working sources, making contacts and trying to get that information confirmed for you tonight. The news continues right here on 11 Alive and on our 11 Alive News app and on 11alive.com. And we explain how you may unknowingly slow down firefighters by limiting access to
fit them all in. You need a team with the experience, knowledge, and results it takes to win for you. That's the Strong Arm, proud partner of the Atlanta Braves.
Bounced from one doctor to the next. Does it have to be like this?
At Kaiser Permanente, we have a different kind of health care.
So, how did you like that?
Where all of us work together for all that is you.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Taco experts since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
It's your thing. Do what you wanna do. I can't tell you who to sock it to. It's your thing. Do what you wanna do. I can't tell you who to sock it to. If you want me to love you, oh, it's your thing. Do what you wanna do.
I'm attorney John Foy. After you've been injured, you need a team with the experience, knowledge, and history of results it takes to win for you. That's the Strong Arm, proud partner of the Atlanta Braves.
Time and Temp, sponsored by Disney's The Lion King at the Fox Theater, October 2nd through 20th.
11 Alive News at 4 p.m. starts now.
And we continue to follow breaking news at this hour at 4 o'clock. At least 4 people are dead after a mass shooting at Apalachee High School, according to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And here's what we know right now. An additional 9 people were taken to area hospitals with injuries, and the suspect is alive and still in custody. We have been covering this ever since reports of that shooting started coming in just after 9:30 today.
That's right. So to give you an idea of where exactly this is happening, we're talking about Apalachee High School. This is in Barrow County, about 45 miles away from Atlanta, about an hour depending on what the traffic is like. And tonight we do have team coverage. We want to start with 11 Alive's Ron Jones, who is live for us at the school. Ron, we know that there's information coming in. We did just hear that a press conference is supposed to be coming down here in about a half hour, 4:30.
Yeah, we're monitoring that situation right now, Faith, but I tell you, I just can't imagine. I'm a dad. I'm a grandpa. I can't imagine getting that call. Can't imagine getting that text from family and friends, maybe the student, maybe your child, maybe teachers, or maybe you have a staff member that works here at Apalachee High School, and you're wondering, is everything okay? And so my heart goes out to them, a lot of prayers for them as well. As we were walking up here to the high school, we saw a line of folks who were, these were mainly parents and their children. They were walking down the street about a mile away from where their cars are parked. Everyone's looking down, everyone's sad. We saw tears as well, and understandably so, right? For you to get this type of message, especially when you learn later on that 4 people have been confirmed dead, multiple people injured at the same time. So of course you're going to be concerned not only just for your child, but you're going to be concerned for the other students as well, and those parents too. Now, let me just set the scene for you. Being a former law enforcement officer, I know that this entire high school is considered a crime scene. So there's a heavy police presence behind me. They have to go from room to room, process each room. I don't care if it's a classroom or if it's a custodian closet, they still have to process the entire high school before they can actually continue with their investigation. We have live team coverage right now. Molly Oakshie got here just moments after those shots were fired. Molly, what can you tell us?
Well, Ron, from the outside, you know, we have seen dozens and dozens of law enforcement, not only right outside the school, but all the way down for blocks. I mean, people were telling me they had to park their car miles away just to get anywhere close. I want to step aside so you can see what we're seeing right now. We are right outside of the high school. And guys, from someone who's been out here for hours, this law enforcement presence has not dwindled. Now, this is what's happening on the outside. I've also been talking to students. Here's what they say happened inside the school.
I heard like screaming and the police officers like, get down, put your hands on your head. It was crazy. And then when they were clearing their building, like the rooms, because you know sometimes the shooters hide amongst the kids, they were clearing our room and they busted the door and they had an AK at us, like telling us to put your hands in the air. It was really crazy. You just never know what's going to happen.
What was going through your head when all that happened?
I thought I was going to die, and I was going to go to the bathroom right before it happened, and I'm so glad that I didn't, because I would probably be dead right now if I did.
There are so many questions still surrounding this, so many unanswered things that people are waiting to hear. Now, some of those questions that parents wanted to hear is just, is my kid okay? Can I take them home? Now, they're starting to get those answers now, but they're still asking me, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Who's behind this? Those are what we're still working to learn right now. The GBI did just confirm with me that there will be a press conference in about 30 minutes that should give us a lot more information. Ron.
Okay, and we're going to be on top of that. By the way, I just can't imagine if you're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and you have to see what you saw and hear what you heard as well. As we pointed out, there were some folks who were injured. Right now, we're going to go to Erica Murphy. She's live right now at Grady Hospital, where one person has been taken there. Erica.
That's right, Ron. As the afternoon wears on, we're learning more and more details about this shooting at Apalachee High School. I'm here at Grady Hospital, where we know at least one of the victims from this high school shooting has been brought. Now, we do not know the condition or the extent of the injuries of the person who was brought here, but around 1:30, I did see more medevacs that landed here at Grady. Earlier, I saw 2 GBI agents pull up in gray Chevy Tahoes. I went over and I spoke with one of those those agents who confirmed that they were there to see the victim who'd been brought here. Now, just before we went live, I would say maybe about 20 minutes before we went live, those two GBI agents that I spoke of earlier, they did leave the hospital, so I think they got what they needed from that victim. I did reach out to hospital officials to confirm if those two additional medevacs that I saw were bringing more victims from that shooting to the hospital. As soon as I get a response from them, of course, I will share that information with you. Back to you, Ron.
All right, Erica, thanks a lot. By the way, Zach Merchant right now, he's at Northeast Georgia Medical Center where another victim has been taken there. Zach, what can you tell us?
Well, Ron, you're right. We are in the Winder location of the Northeast Georgia Medical Center. You can see it behind us. And just in the last roughly 45 minutes, we got an update from a hospital system spokesperson. This is what he tells us. There are now 2 gunshot victims from today's Apalachee High School shooting being treated here at the Northeast Georgia Medical Center Barrow location. That's up from 1 victim just a little while earlier today. The spokesperson says an additional 3rd victim is being treated at the Northeast Georgia Medical Center's Gainesville location. That location is a level 1 trauma center. Good news here, though. The spokesperson says all 3 of the victims being treated within the Northeast Georgia hospital system have non-life-threatening injuries. Now, right across from the hospital, in the parking lot where we are standing, is an auto shop. And in that auto shop are 2 young men. They just turned 18, Ashton Hopkins and Christian Kinna. Both of them just graduated from Winder Barrow High School, which is another local Barrow County high school. They were also, that high school, on lockdown earlier today as a precaution. There was no active threat there, but both Hopkins and Kinna say they know plenty of people in the Appalachia high school community. Here is a little bit of what they told us this afternoon.
I hope I don't see anybody's names that I know or recognize on that list, and I'm hoping, you know, the people's families, and just because whenever stuff like this happens, there's a domino effect, you know what I mean? It's just more bad.
Because me personally, when stuff like this happens, it makes me scared for my own security, knowing that this could happen to just anybody at any time, no matter what. This just makes me scared for, number 1, America's future, number 2, the general public at the moment.
And you talk about just what a close-knit, small community this is. Christian says he's got a younger sister who is still at Winder Barrow High School. She was on lockdown herself today. Christian says she's all right, but it's hard to imagine just how scary, how terrible that situation would have been for her. And the hospital spokesperson, he says they're seeing the impacts of that as well. In addition to the 3 gunshot victims they're treating, he says the Northeast Georgia hospital system has seen 5 patients check themselves in with what he says are anxiety or panic attack related symptoms related to today's high school shooting. For now, we are live in Winder. Zach Merchant, 11 Alive News.
All right, Zach, thanks a lot for the update there. I can't imagine going from 0 to 100, that stress level there, especially these young kids as well. So stand by, everyone. Our team is going to be standing by here. We're going to have an update from GBI at 4:30. They're going to have a press conference because we want to know who's behind the shooting, what is the motive for that shooting, and we'll bring you the very latest coming up here as soon as we can. Back to you guys in the studio.
We are all waiting for those answers. Ron, before you go, I do want to ask you this. We're going on now 6 hours since those first calls came in about the shooting. We can see behind you a pretty significant police presence. Earlier today, it was just incredible the amount of law enforcement there. Can you describe sort of the scene still there tonight? Are you still seeing parents, a lot of law enforcement? What's kind of going on around you?
Well, you know, you can't see behind me, but we did see a train of parents who were walking down the street trying to make their way back to the car. But keep in mind, anytime you have an active shooter situation, you're not just going to have one agency that's going to show up. Barrow County is not just going to show up, but you're going to have multiple agencies that are going to show up. They're going to be, they call that mutual aid, where they're trying to help out the other agencies, and they've already had this plan in place. So, as I pointed out at the top of the broadcast, there is an army of law enforcement behind me, and they have to process the entire high school, not just a section, not just where the shooting occurred, but interior part of that high school, the exterior part of the high school. And as Molly pointed out, law enforcement is going to be here for quite some time.
Exactly what the sheriff said. Our Ron Jones, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ron, and so many unanswered questions still. Like Ron was saying, we are expecting a press conference to come down at 4:30 that will answer, hopefully, a lot of the questions that so many people still have. How long did it take law enforcement to get there? Was this just one shooter or many shooters? We do have some new information from NBC News reporting that the suspected shooter is a teenager. Multiple senior law enforcement officials telling NBC News this. Police are still trying to determine with certainty the individual's name and whether or not they had a prior affiliation with the school. So that is information that we're getting right now. But again, we are hoping that the GBI will give us some more concrete information at 4:30.
Any moment now. And we, of course, are going to continue to stay on top of this story. We'll take a quick break and be right back.
How does Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield build healthier communities?
With accessibility. At DC Prep, we help students from DC's underserved communities achieve their dreams through access to strong academics and social-emotional education. So we need a healthcare partner who can be there for our teachers just as much as we are there for our students. Care First delivers high-quality care that's accessible, and they actively work with our staff so they can be at their best for those who need it most.
When it's time to choose the right products for your project, Ferguson makes sure everything runs smoothly from start to finish. Shop the best selection of brands like Le Cornu at your local Ferguson Bath, Kitchen, and Lighting Gallery. When it's time to choose the right products for your project, Ferguson makes sure everything runs smoothly from start to finish. Shop the best selection of brands like Signature Kitchen Suite at your local Ferguson Bath, Kitchen, and Lighting Gallery. When it's time to choose the right products for your project, Ferguson makes sure everything runs smoothly from start to finish.